Chapter 153. You let them go just like that. Didn't you say that you wouldn't let any humans go? After Guhan and the others left the altar, a wooden tortoise slowly crawled out of the tunnel and said to Merlin, who was standing on the altar, "I've changed my mind. Humans who can walk out of your place should be stronger than other humans." Merlin said in detail. His originally smooth and delicate skin began to slowly age, and finally, he became the old man with white hair that Magic Pen had seen a few times before. "What are you planning?" "Merlin, could it be that filth hasn't completely controlled you?" the wooden tortoise asked curiously. "Of course filth has controlled me long ago. Old thing Luban, I don't have a strong backer like you. Filth has long penetrated into my bones. I'm already filthy beyond cure. I'm completely a filthy person." Merlin laughed. He laughed very happily. "We really came out just like that." Steel Centipede, who had just come out of the basement, still had a dumbfounded look on his face. Wasn't this plot a bit too inexplicable? Great Wizard Merlin, who had originally planned to fight with all his might, had actually let him go just like that. "Be careful, don't drop King Arthur." Hong Yu, who was at the side, curled her lips. Steel Centipede and Ji Han were carrying the stretcher together. On the stretcher was the unconscious King Arthur. At this time, King Arthur Artoria was like a clear spring, sleeping on the stretcher. His delicate nose moved up and down as he breathed, making Guhan want to take a bite. Wait, Guhan's mind seemed to have lost control again. "Maybe it's because we took the middle road." Magic Pen glanced at Guhan. "Thanks to Brother Military Governor, we took the middle road today, so Merlin didn't attack us. Other than that, I can't think of any other explanation to explain this." Steel Centipede pursed his lips and wanted to refute, but after thinking about it, he really couldn't find a reason to refute. Although Steel Centipede was a bit narrow-minded, he wasn't an unreasonable person. Since he couldn't find a reason, he could only suppress his anger. System prompt, Mission 6, Save King Arthur has been completed. King Arthur Artoria Pendragon has broken free from the magic shackles and left Terminal T1. Mission progress, 50%. The main quest has been updated. System notice, Quest 7, Escape from Pursuit. King Arthur has escaped, but the news will reach the ears of the 3 Universe Kings who were lured away by the Ardwolves. The first Universe King will hunt you down in an hour. Please escape to the first safe location and use the communication device there to contact Yangjing City to get more help. System prompt, please take note, in the process of escaping, please ensure that King Arthur does not die and is not recaptured by the pursuers. If we can't reach the safe point within 3 hours, the first safe point will be destroyed. Let's go to Terminal 2. As soon as the mission notification sounded, Magic Pen immediately led his team straight to Terminal T2. If it weren't for the fact that Ji Han and Steel Centipede were carrying the stretcher and deliberately slowed down, they would have run so fast that they would have flown. Terminal 2 wasn't far from Terminal T1. A normal person would be able to reach it in 10 minutes. With Guhan and the others running at full speed, they reached the entrance of Terminal 2 in less than a minute. There are many Yuan Ku in Terminal 2, but our goal isn't to kill them all. Our goal is the perfectly preserved Paraman Marauder in Terminal 2's cargo warehouse. We have to reach the warehouse as soon as possible, seize the Paraman Marauder, and leave the ruins of Xianyang Airport. Xianyang was more than 900 kilometers away from Yangjing City. It was impossible for Guhan and the others to run there on foot, so they had to find a suitable means of transportation. In the real world, when a swordsman went on a raid, he would bring along a hovercar distributed by the council. It came with a fully automatic driving system, allowing the swordsman to move quickly in any terrain. There was no need to look for a means of transportation. But obviously, there was no such treatment in the Instance Dungeon. Magic Pen and the others had to find a moving means of transportation. Fortunately, this was the ruins of the airport, so they didn't lack cars. According to later statistics, there were 5 large parking lots in the ruins of Xianyang Airport, with about 5,000 cars parked there. Unfortunately, after hundreds of years of exposure to the elements, 99% of these cars had become useless scraps of iron. Since 99. 99% of them had become scraps of iron. It meant that 0.1% of the cars could still be used. The first time they came to this part of the instance dungeon, Magic Pen and the others wasted more than an hour before they found a normal car, an intact Paraman Marauder. The Paraman Marauder was equipped with a CUMMEN SISB 4 diesel engine, 300 PS1 100 Nm. It was an invincible off-road vehicle with a weight of up to 15 tons. He possessed powerful bulletproof capabilities and was able to withstand damage from hand grenades, submachine guns, anti-tank mines, and 7,000 TNT equivalents. From a certain perspective, he was not much different from a tank. Yup, he could run faster than a tank. The Paraman Marauder could reach a maximum speed of 120 km per hour and could travel in all terrain. When faced with obstacles such as walls, trees, and boulders blocking the way, one could just ignore them and rush through them. If one didn't mind the repair fees, it could also run freely in the forest, provided that one had to avoid some very thick trees. In addition, it could maintain normal operation at temperatures below 55 degrees Celsius and above -35 degrees Celsius. It could also be freely driven in waist-deep rivers. It could even be driven on a minefield without having to worry about the tires. In short, this was an off-road vehicle that was very suitable for driving on the roads of the apocalypse. With it, one could overcome about 70% of difficult terrain and maintain a high speed of about 60 km per hour. There was simply no other vehicle that was more suitable for Guhan's team at this time. Therefore, this Paraman Marauder was something that Guhan and the others had to obtain. A Templar was lowering his head to take care of his armor. For a qualified Templar, taking care of his armor until it was as shiny as new was a daily requirement. If one day, the armor was stained with dust, it would be a huge stain in his life that could never be erased. Therefore, he had to carefully take care of his armor. Suddenly, a flash of light flashed in front of him. What is this? What a fast flash of light! Just as the Templar thought of this, he felt his head lighten and then fell down. His eyes just happened to be able to see his toes. This sword mistress is very strong. This was the first time Guhan saw the sword mistress, Chengying, in action. The last time he saw Chengying, it was in the dark vortex of the night. Guhan did not see anything, but this time, Guhan saw it. Chengying's swordsmanship was very strong. Among all the sword mistresses that Guhan had seen, it was the most powerful one. Thanks to the fact that he and Steel Centipede were carrying the stretcher, Miaobi did not let him clean up the Yuan Ku in Terminal T2. Instead, he, the Yu siblings, and Hong Yu did it. It was too easy and fast for Chengying to clean up these rubbish Jiao-class and Dragon-class Yuan Ku. It was always one slash, never procrastinating, and never wasting any time. The blade of the sword just cut down the fatal parts of the Yuan Ku, and then slid through the gaps of the muscles, cutting off all the vitality of the Yuan Ku. The number of Yuan Zhun that Chengying had killed was more or less the same as the other three combined. From this, it could be seen how powerful Chengying was. And her master, Wondrous Brush, was worthy of being hailed as the strongest person in this team. Guhan asked himself that even if he used all his trump cards, he would not be a match for Chengying. Chengying's Chengying was powerful, and his 9 swords of mysterious heaven could also suppress her. Not to mention the 9 heaven-defying moves of the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. What made Guhan admit that he was inferior was the 300,000 swordsmanship points on Miaobi. Guhan only had a little more than 2,500 swordsmanship points. No matter how exquisite his moves were, after his sword energy was exhausted, he would be tortured by Chengying. With the full protection of the Chengying sword, it didn't take much time to cross Terminal T2 to reach the warehouse. The Yu siblings slashed open the rotten door of the warehouse, and a warehouse full of goods appeared in front of Ji Yuhan's eyes. Military Governor, Steel Centipede, put King Arthur down. Sikong and Siyu, stand guard at the door. You go guard the roof. Steel Centipede, cooperate with me. Peel off the skin of that Paramount Marauder and fix it. Military Governor, there is a barrel of diesel in the warehouse. Go find it and pour it into the fuel tank. Miaobi assigned the tasks one by one. Although this Paramount Marauder was in good condition, after hundreds of years, there was still some damage. The first time he used this car, The engine stalled halfway and he had to abandon the car and walk on foot. One of the 10 kings caught up with him and he had to give up the task and leave the instant's dungeon. After that, Meowby spent a day learning a set of car maintenance and repair skills from 1,000 years ago on the internet. Sure enough, he found many problems with this seemingly new car. After repairing it, there were no more cases of it breaking down halfway. Guhan, who was assigned the task of finding diesel, quickly found a barrel of diesel in a corner of the warehouse. He weighed it and found that the originally full barrel of diesel was now less than half a barrel. It was likely due to volatilization. After hundreds of years, no matter how well it was sealed, a lot of diesel would have volatilized. The remaining diesel was not even enough to fill up half of the Marauder's fuel tank. The diesel that could have provided this 15-ton steel behemoth with a speed of 500 kilometers could only be used for around 100 kilometers. In other words, if Guhan and the others wanted to drive this car to a safe point, they would have to find a gas station that could refuel with diesel along the way. In an instant's dungeon hundreds of years after the apocalypse, this was a very difficult thing to do. The diesel at the gas station would also volatilize. Chapter 154. Damn it. This thing is so fun to drive. Steel Centipede, who was sitting in the driver's seat, shouted excitedly. He kept turning the steering wheel, and his body was constantly bumped up and down as if he was sitting on a trampoline. Awesome. Damn it. Every time I come to this dungeon, I count on this car. It was obvious that Steel Centipede was very satisfied with the paramount Marauder that he was driving. This king of the land gave Steel Centipede an unparalleled driving experience. Of course, the Yu siblings, who were bumping their heads on the roof of the car many times, might not think so. Although hundreds of years later, traces of the roads of the past could still be seen on the ground, the road conditions were no different from the surface of the moon. Every 5 steps, there would be a ditch, and every 10 steps, there would be a pit. Occasionally, there would be large pieces of soil blocking the road, or there would be collapsed concrete buildings. One could imagine how bad the road conditions were. Usually, when sword bearers went out, they would drive a hovercraft to deal with these bad road conditions. A hovercraft that hovered 10 meters above the ground could shield them from the bad road conditions by 90%. But driving an off-road vehicle was different. The thrill of the bumpy road was really enjoyable. Many swordbearers loved this thrill to death. They even custom-made super off-road vehicles that could be used for both wet and floating purposes. When there was no Yuanshan to deal with, they would open the field mode and enjoy the highs of life as much as they wanted on the undulating ground. For example, Steel Centipede was such a person. However, Magic Pen, who was sitting beside Steel Centipede, had a tense expression on his face. He did not say anything, and no one could see his expression. However, from his right hand that was tightly grasping the armrest, Magic Pen's mood was a little subtle. The Yu siblings' behavior was the other extreme compared to Steel Centipede's. Yu Siu was tightly hugging her brother's arms, trembling and shouting, "Brother, I'm scared." Although Yu Sikong was also very scared, he still hugged his sister tightly and put his face on his sister's neck. No, he was just comforting his sister. If Magic Pen was forced to be calm, then Hong Yu was really calm. Moreover, no matter how the car shook, Hong Yu's buttocks could be firmly fixed on the seat. She didn't even float, as if her buttocks were fixed on the seat by a nail. This was a very amazing thing. I believe that all readers have experienced the scene of their head bumping into the roof of the car. Who do you think can be like Hong Yu? No matter how bumpy the car is, she will not leave the seat. Like Hong Yu, there was another person who could maintain this magical state. Naturally, that person was Guhan sitting in the last row. Guhan had another task, which was to take care of the unconscious Artoria. Guhan did not refuse this task. Guhan placed Artoria flat on the seat at the back, and then used the nylon rope he found in the car to tie Artoria's body tightly to the seat. This way, Artoria would not be hurt by the car's bumpy ride. Guhan even let Artoria's head rest on his lap to make her as comfortable as possible. This was the first time Guhan took care of someone to this extent, and it was a Yuan Ku, a virtual Yuan Ku that existed in the game. Guhan also did not understand why he was like this. This was not like him at all. What was more serious was that Guhan could feel the blood in his body flowing uncontrollably to his lower body. As long as Artoria was by Guhan's side, Guhan's imagination would run wild, and he would imagine many scenes that he had never thought of before. Even when Mayun bathed him, Guhan's heart did not waver. It was completely different from today, when he only took a look at Artoria's body, and he felt like he was going to explode. Is this my karmic fire? Guhan remembered a passage in the Green Lotus Three Swords. The karmic fire blazes, and the heart springs boil. If the karmic fire is not extinguished, the sword technique will not succeed. I'm in big trouble. Guhan smiled bitterly, closed his eyes, and did not look at Artoria again. System notification. The first universe level, Yuan Ku, has received the news that King Arthur Artoria has been rescued. He is now rushing towards you. Please find a safe place as soon as possible to avoid the first universe level, Yuan Ku's pursuit. Guhan closed his eyes and rested for a while. Then, he suddenly received a notification from the system. These universe-level Yuan Ku seemed to have a way to track Artoria's position, and they could accurately locate Guhan and the others. Therefore, they had to find a safe place before Yuan Ku arrived. Everyone, start the countdown. The time is 1.5 hours. Magic Pen, whose face was pale, heard the system notification and ordered Guhan and the others. 1.5 hours was based on past experience. The first Yuan Ku needed to catch up to them. In fact, Magic Pen could increase the time a little, so the actual time needed to catch up was more than 1 hour and 40 minutes. Understood. Steel Puppet, how long can the current diesel last? Magic Pen asked Steel Puppet. We can still run for about 10 kilometers. Steel Puppet glanced at the fuel gauge. We are about 8 kilometers away from the first diesel supply point. We can catch up. Only 2 kilometers of fuel left. Wondrous Pen was a little puzzled. He clearly remembered that the last time he arrived at the first diesel supply point, there should still be 5 kilometers of fuel left. No wonder it felt more bumpy just now than the previous few times. This steel centipede must have chosen a difficult path in pursuit of excitement. Wondrous Pen guessed, but he didn't blame the steel centipede. After the bumpy journey, the raiders arrived at the first fuel supply point. It was a gas station that had been abandoned for God knows how long. The concrete structure was still intact, but the roof of the gas station, which was supported by steel bars, had completely collapsed. Everything, including the refueling equipment, was buried by the roof. However, a tall and cowardly sign was still standing in the same place. The Dim China Petrochemical Company told everyone who the original owner of this gas station was. Even if it was not buried, it would still be the same. After hundreds of years, even if the equipment was maintained with oiled paper in Germany, it would definitely be useless. Even if the refueling equipment could still be used, the diesel in the underground storage would have long evaporated. Even if it had not evaporated completely, after hundreds of years, who knew how many impurities had been mixed into it? It would be strange if it could still be used. Steel Puppet, drive the car to the oil truck. Remember to find an oil drum and bring the rest of the diesel. Fortunately, there was still half a can of diesel stored in the tightly sealed oil truck. It was enough to fill the raiders' fuel tank. It could even be said that they were a little rich. While Steel Puppet was refueling, Guhan also very considerately carried Artoria from the back seat so that she could also recover under his gaze. As soon as she was exposed to the sun, he found that Artoria's nose began to turn red, sweat began to appear on her forehead, and the skin of her mouth became very dry. She began to unconsciously moan and shout, "Water, water, water, Hongyu, did any of you bring water? Artoria is thirsty." Guhan wanted to ask for some water from Hongyu and the others. "Water? There's no water." Hongyu looked at the sweating Artoria with a strange expression. "Magic Pen specifically told us not to bring water." Hearing Hongyu's words, Guhan was silent. He had read the complete dungeon information and naturally knew why Magic Pen specifically told them not to bring any water. "It's good for us if she doesn't drink water." Hongyu paused. "After all, she is just an NPC. You don't have to be so concerned about her." "Yeah, she's just an NPC." Guhan laughed self-deprecatingly. What was wrong with him today? Why was he acting like this in front of an NPC? Wasn't he the one who would laugh to death at any NPC as long as they were of help to him in completing the quest? Why was he concerned about an NPC's thirst? Moreover, she was thirsty and would be of help to the quest. Let's go, get in the car. On the other side, Steelboy had already filled the Marauders with diesel and put 2 bottles of spare diesel in the trunk. Just as Magic Pen was about to call Guhan and the others to get in the car and leave, the ground suddenly began to shake. Hongyu, what happened? Magic Pen asked Hongyu, who was in charge of investigating. Let me see. Hongyu jumped onto the roof of the gas station and looked into the distance. Her expression changed. Reporting, there's a Godzilla approaching us. Godzilla? Why is he here? Wondrous Pen suspected that his ears were playing tricks on him. In the past dozen or so instance dungeons, he had never encountered Godzilla. How could he appear this time when he was refueling his car? Captain, don't think about it. It must be because we didn't defeat Merlin, so Bat changed our opponent. Damn, Steelboy would rather fight with that old guy Merlin. Steelboy was on the verge of tears as he said this, because Godzilla was a more troublesome Yuan Ku than Merlin. Yuan Ku name, Godzilla, first generation, level, Meteor World of Origin, Eastern Magic Beasts Instance Dungeon Appearance, Rare Instance Dungeon Health, 5 stars Attack, 4 stars Agility, 2 stars Monster Power, 5 stars Abilities. Godzilla's entire body is a weapon. The most powerful are his claws and the heat ray he shoots from his mouth. Ultimate move, Stomp, Collapse of Heaven and Earth, Heat Ray. Description: although he belongs to the Eastern Magic Beasts, his fighting style and appearance are more similar to the Western Magic Beasts. Godzilla has appeared many times in history, and each time he was killed, but each time he resurrected. Thus, some people say that Godzilla is actually a race, but no one knows the truth. Godzilla has the health of a Meteor Yuan Ku, the attack of a Meteor Yuan Ku, and the monster power of a Meteor Yuan Ku, but his agility is terrible. He doesn't seem to be good at dealing with agile opponents, so try to eliminate him like ants biting an elephant to death. Chapter 155. Everyone, get in the car and leave this place immediately. Quick. At Magic Pen's command, everyone entered the car in a single file. Although Guhan was carrying Artoria, he was the first to enter the car. Let's go. I hope this Godzilla isn't coming for us. Unfortunately, Magic Pen's hope was soon dashed. After Steel Centipede drove the Marauder at full speed for a while, Magic Pen sadly discovered that Godzilla was right behind them. Moreover, the distance between them was getting closer and closer. Obviously, Godzilla had no intention of separating from Guhan and the others. Steel Centipede, speed up. Steel Centipede had been waiting for these words for a long time. At Magic Pen's command, Steel Centipede immediately stepped on the accelerator. The car's speed from 60 km per hour to 100 km per hour. This was a severe test for both the Marauder and the passengers in the car. This was especially true for the unconscious Artoria. In his haste to carry her into the car, Guhan did not secure her with the nylon rope again. He could only hold her in his arms and let the rich fragrance of her body enter his nose and ears. His lower body was getting more and more uncontrollable. Damn it, now is not the time to think about these things. Guhan turned his head and looked at Godzilla, who was chasing after the car. He immediately said, "Stop the car. We can't run anymore. Godzilla is still getting closer. Even if it can't catch up with us, the car will be finished before us at this rate." Guhan was right. When they had passed through a lot of very rough roads, the car's chassis and the front of the car had probably suffered a lot of damage. It might not be serious for a while, but after a long time, the Marauder would definitely break down. At that time, they would even lose their only means of transportation. Stop the car. Let us down. Magic Pen was, after all, the brain of Yaoguang's sword faction. At this critical moment, he was clear about the situation and knew that they could not run anymore. Yes. Steel Centipede came to an abrupt stop, and Guhan and the others jumped out of the window. Steel Centipede also wanted to get out and fight, but he was stopped by Magic Pen. You go first, park this car in a safe place, and then come back to meet us. In the eyes of Magic Pen, there was no doubt about the weight of this Marauder. He would rather temporarily lose a powerful combat force like Steel Centipede than let this marauder be damaged. Understood. Steel Centipede drove the raider and sped away with Artoria, leaving Guhan and the other 4 to face the 80-meter-tall, 20,000-ton monster. Captain, how should we deal with him? Yu Seetsung's face scrunched up. This gigantic Godzilla was too tricky to deal with. He was so tricky that he had no experience in dealing with him. He could only look at Magic Brush with a hopeful gaze, hoping that he could give 1 or 2 wise opinions. I don't know either. Magic Brush's words instantly made Yu Sikong despair. But Mr. Military Governor might know. Magic Brush looked at Guhan indifferently. Mr. Military Governor, I will now hand over the command to you. It's time for you to show us your commanding ability. Okay. Guhan looked at Magic Brush deeply and calmly accepted the command. Above the ruins, 2 streams of light suddenly flashed. If one used a high-speed camera to track them, they would find that they were a pair of cute girls who looked like a dragon and a phoenix. They rushed towards the gigantic Godzilla without hesitation. Compared to the size of Godzilla, the 2 girls looked like 2 toy soldiers. Hiss. Godzilla let out a deafening hiss. It had discovered the 2 girls who were overestimating themselves. It lifted one of its feet and tried to stomp the 2 girls to death as if they were cockroaches. Anyone who had stepped on cockroaches before knew that it wasn't easy to stomp a cockroach to death, especially a pair of intelligent and fast cockroaches. The 2 girls dodged Godzilla's foot and took advantage of the momentum to step on Godzilla's rough skin, which was like a staircase, and quickly walked up. Godzilla has a weakness, and because of his size, his weakness is infinitely magnified. In fact, Godzilla is the same as humans. He's most afraid of moves like the kick to the groin. You can see his private parts if you keep moving up his legs. Attack those 2 big pockets. Godzilla can't bear this kind of pain. This was what Ji Yu Han had said to the Yu siblings before the operation, and the Yu siblings' sword Maiden's twin sword Mandarin Duck also acted strictly according to these words. As for what those 2 big pockets are, I think the author doesn't need to explain. If you don't know, you can go to the bathroom and see for yourself. The twin sword sisters kept moving up Godzilla's legs. Godzilla seemed to have realized that their destination wasn't friendly. He squatted down and began to slap his legs with both hands, trying to kill the 2 flies. Godzilla will definitely try to slap you off. Don't panic. At this time, you don't need to move up anymore. You just need to transform into your sword form and stick to Godzilla's skin. The double sword Mandarin Duck looked at each other. Everything was just as the military governor had said. Godzilla began to try to slap himself off with his hands. Thus, the double sword Mandarin Duck suddenly transformed back into its sword form and stuck to Godzilla's skin. As mentioned before, Godzilla's skin was like a staircase. It wasn't difficult to stick to it. Godzilla's wide palms couldn't do anything to the tiny sword ladies. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't slap the 2 swords off. Godzilla's arms are very short. When he's standing upright, he won't be afraid of hitting his legs, so he has to bend down. Cheng Ying, you are faster than the double sword Mandarin Duck. You hide in the shadow of the twin swords. When Godzilla bends down, his buttocks will be exposed. This is your chance. Take the opportunity to cut a hole in his buttocks. This was what Guhan said to Cheng Ying before the battle. When Godzilla bends down, his buttocks will naturally be exposed. The reason why Cheng Ying was called Cheng Ying was because her Confucian trait was that she could hide in all shadows. When the twin swords flew toward Godzilla, Cheng Ying would hide in the shadow of the twin swords. This way, Godzilla wouldn't even notice Cheng Ying's approach. When Godzilla lifted his foot to stomp the twin swords to death, the shadows of the twin swords and Godzilla's shadow merged perfectly. The shadow naturally shifted into Godzilla's shadow and quickly arrived behind Godzilla, where Godzilla's line of sight couldn't reach. The twin swords moved up Godzilla's legs. Cheng Ying also moved up Godzilla's legs. However, Godzilla's attention was all on the twin swords. He didn't notice that Cheng Ying had sneakily climbed up to his buttocks. Edgeless pain. Cheng Ying smirked, and a faint blue light flashed on the blade. The Cheng Ying sword in Cheng Ying's hand immediately turned into a sword shadow. 3 seconds later, the sword shadow disappeared. Godzilla's buttocks, which was 10 square meters in size and 1 meter deep, was easily cut off by Cheng Ying. Godzilla did not feel any pain at all. Basic skill, edgeless pain. For 5 seconds after using it, enemies who receive Cheng Ying's attack won't feel any pain. However, the pain won't disappear. After 10 seconds, all the accumulated pain will erupt at the same time, instantly producing 10 times the normal pain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Godzilla, who didn't notice Cheng Ying, was still trying to slap off the twin swords that were attached to his body. Suddenly, Godzilla's hand stopped. An indescribable pain suddenly rushed to Godzilla's brain. His originally red eyes instantly became like flames, and he let out a shrill scream. The pain was so intense that Godzilla couldn't control his skill. A scorching hot current sprayed out from his mouth. Everything that the current touched was melted into black slag. Its power was comparable to Janaida's dragon flame. At the same time, because the pain came from Godzilla's buttocks, Godzilla almost completely lost his sense of balance. He staggered, his whole body leaned backward, and fell to the ground. Godzilla's body is very heavy. Being able to walk upright is simply against the laws of physics. Therefore, if he wants to maintain his upright state, he must firmly maintain his center of gravity. Godzilla's center of gravity is on his buttocks. If his buttocks receive a fatal injury, he won't be able to maintain his upright state and will fall backward. Hongyu, it's time for you to act. Your target is Godzilla's eyes. Listen to my command and use your ultimate skill. Don't hesitate. Hongyu was a murderous sword mistress. She was born with the ability to conceal herself. Before the twin swords attracted Godzilla's attention, she had already followed Guhan's instructions and waited somewhere behind Godzilla. 30 seconds before Godzilla fell to the ground. Hongyu, use your ultimate skill, first Madame Gongsun's sword dance. At that time, Hongyu was very confused because Hongyu was quite a distance away from Godzilla. If she used her ultimate skill, it would be impossible for her to hit Godzilla. However, Hongyu still obediently used her ultimate skill. In the air, illusions of Hongyu began to appear. 30 seconds later, Hongyu's illusions increased to 50. Godzilla fell to the ground. Hongyu was pleasantly surprised to find that her position was exactly where Godzilla's head had fallen to the ground. Without saying a word, the 50 illusions uniformly rushed toward Godzilla's crimson eyes. Godzilla, who had already fallen to the ground without any warning, did not expect that someone would be waiting for him. His eyes were wide open as he allowed the 50 illusions to rush into his eyes. As the saying goes, when the silver bottle is broken, the water splashes. When the iron cavalry charges, the sound of swords and spears. This Godzilla was undoubtedly blind. Chapter 156. This meteor Yuan-Ku Godzilla didn't even have the time to attack its opponent. It didn't even have the chance to spit out a heat beam. Under Guhan's series of calculations, it was blinded. It was truly a tragedy. Without its eyes, the Godzilla had no way to resist the attacks of the 4 sword maidens. It could only let the 4 sword maidens kill it. The only difference was how long it took. Let's retreat. Just as all the sword maidens were preparing to work together to kill this Godzilla, Guhan's new order came. He actually told Cheng Ying and the other sword maidens to retreat. It would only take a little time to kill this Godzilla. Why did they retreat? Cheng Ying and the other sword maidens didn't understand. Just as they were about to ask, Guhan took the initiative to explain through their sword maidens, killing this Godzilla is meaningless. On the contrary, it will waste a lot of time. We are currently avoiding the universe-level Yuan-Ku, so the most important thing is to save time. This Godzilla's eyes are already blind. It's no threat to us. Let's retreat. Hearing Ji Yuhan's explanation, Cheng Ying and the others blushed. They had been too successful in this battle. They had been so focused on getting rid of their enemies that they had forgotten the crux of the mission. It was this swordsman called the Admiral who had maintained the most basic level of calmness. After the battle ended, the sword maidens returned. Magic Pen dialed Steel Python's communicator and asked, "Steel Python, how's your situation?" "Captain, I found a river. I'll drive there immediately and hide the car. Then, I'll meet up with you guys and fight together, Steel Python said loudly through the communicator. From his hurried tone, it seemed like he was really anxious to come over and help. Unfortunately, he was destined to be of no help. You haven't driven into the river yet, right? Hurry up and come back to pick us up. Magic Pen was really afraid that Steel Python would park the car in the river. Otherwise, it would take a lot of time to drive out of the river. No, Captain, we don't want this raider anymore. I understand. Captain, I'll be right back. You must hold on and wait for Steel Centipede to come and save you. Save your head. Hurry up and come back. That Godzilla has already been killed. Hong Yu forcefully interrupted the conversation between the Magic Pen and the Steel Centipede and attacked the Steel Centipede's face. What? What did Steel Centipede know? Hong Yu is right. Steel Centipede, hurry up and drive the car back. Speaking up to this point, Clever Pen couldn't help but feel a bit regretful. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have let Steel Centipede drive the car away. If he waited for Steel Centipede to drive back, he would have wasted a few more minutes. After all, that universe-level Yuan Ku was still chasing after him. As soon as Steel Centipede's car returned, Guhan was the first to jump into the back of the car. Just as he had guessed, Steel Centipede didn't care about Artoria, who was lying in the back of the car. The back and forth jolted her to the position between the two seats, and she lay face down there. Guhan picked up Artoria and turned her over. He was surprised to find that the white wedding dress on Artoria's chest had turned black, and this black color gradually began to spread to the rest of the white parts. She will wake up soon. You need to be ready for battle. Hong Yu's voice suddenly sounded. This time, Hong Yu didn't sit in the second row with the Yu siblings. Instead, she sat in the last row, side by side with Guhan. Guhan didn't speak. He looked at the black wedding dress in a daze. Do you like her? Like our King Arthur, Miss Artoria? Very abruptly, Hong Yu asked such an awkward question for no reason. I don't know. Guhan raised his head and looked straight into Hong Yu's eyes. It's impossible that you don't know, Mr. Military Governor. Someone as calm and intelligent as you can't figure out your own thoughts. Or are you not willing to admit it? Hong Yu pressed on. I am indeed confused about my state, but I can confirm that I don't have the traditional love between a man and a woman for Artoria. Guhan's eyes were very clear. It's just that my body secretes some hormones that cause me to have some physiological reaction to Artoria. This reaction shouldn't have happened. Physiological reaction? Hong Yu's expression became somewhat ambiguous. Don't you want to be in perfect harmony with Artoria? To do something that makes love? You don't have to use such ambiguous word games, Hong Yu. To put it simply and seriously, I just want to make love. This is a male's instinct. I have the urge to mate with her. This time, Hong Yu was dumbfounded. This military governor looked like a mysterious, arrogant, and very cold man. How could his image collapse in an instant and say such vulgar words, and when he said this, he still had an innocent expression as if he was a very decent person. But she's just a pile of data. Don't tell me you want to do something to a bunch of electronic signals. Hong Yu's face turned red. Not really. Guhan focused and calmed himself down. I look forward to meeting her in reality. That way, some of the doubts in my heart can be solved. In reality, you may be disappointed. Since the battle, Artoria has not appeared in front of the world. Didn't the Sword Council already state on her information that she is suspected to be dead? The Sword Council's words can be trusted. Even a pig can be a sword bearer. Guhan said disdainfully. Artoria should be somewhere in reality. I will meet her sooner or later. Come on, Mr. Military Governor. Although you have grown very fast in the game and are already a sword bearer of the famed sword level, in reality, you probably aren't even a sword bearer. The mission to find Artoria is a little too early for you. You should think carefully about how to deal with this Artoria in your arms later. She has already started to change color. When the time comes, she will no longer have that vivacious vibe in your arms. This is the reason why your sect leader Yaoguang invited me here. Isn't the person in my arms the reason why you are always stuck at the 60% node? Let me correct you, Mr. Military Governor. It's us, Hong Yu said with a straight face. If you don't solve this problem, then we will always be stuck at 60% progress. Yes, as Guhan said, Artoria was the reason why the dungeon was stuck at 60% progress. Just like the smear of black on the pure white wedding dress that Guhan saw, once the smear of black engulfed the entire wedding dress and turned the pure white wedding dress into a pure black wedding dress, Artoria would wake up from her coma. But at that time, Artoria would be a completely defiled Artoria. She was cold, heartless, and merciless. She attacked Magic Pen and the others who rescued her without mercy. Moreover, she was so powerful. The first time they faced Artoria, they were caught off guard. They only lasted for 3 minutes before they were all killed by Artoria. Only Hong Yu and one person escaped from the dungeon through the exit, but they failed the dungeon and all of them had a 3-day holiday. In the next dozen or so dungeon runs, Magic Pen and the others continued to make various preparations and came up with various battle plans to understand the various combat methods of the corrupted Artoria. Even though these methods had successfully delayed the battle to around 7 minutes, however, in the face of Dark Artoria with universe level or even universe level strength, all their plans were futile. They could only hold on for a little longer and leave the dungeon through the exit. The core reason why Yao Guang hired Military Governor as a strategy expert was that he hoped that Guhan could find a way to defeat Artoria or rescue her from her defiled state. Yes, it's us. Guhan nodded, agreeing with what Hong Yu said. Hong Yu wanted to say something, but she suddenly saw one of Guhan's hands suddenly grab the collar of Artoria's wedding dress and forcefully pull it down. Artoria's white wedding dress was completely torn by Guhan. Artoria's naked upper body, including a pair of snowflake buns, was exposed in front of Guhan and Hong Yu. What are you doing? Are you crazy? You pervert! Hong Yu jumped up in shock and shouted loudly. Everyone sitting in front couldn't help but look back. Then they saw Guhan holding Artoria's naked body with one hand and caressing Artoria's chest with the other. Pervert! Pervert! I'm so jealous. All the little friends expressed that they were stunned. Close your eyes, you perverts. Hong Yu's hand shook, and a layer of illusion blocked the 4 people sitting in front from peeping at Artoria's body. What a pity, I only got a glimpse. White, Gunrun said. Chapter 157. Don't get too excited, I'm just doing some experiment. Guhan lowered his head and glanced at Artoria's infinitely beautiful body. Of course, the scenery here is also very good. Experiments. Military Governor, what did you find? Magic Pen was probably the calmest of them all, and he really believed what Guhan said. He was the one who was doing experiments. Some very interesting discoveries, such as here. Guhan pointed at Artoria's chest where her heart was. There is a wound the width of 2 fingers here, and it seems like something has drilled into her wound. Everyone knew that a girl's heart was soft, so Guhan's finger rubbed on Artoria's big meat bun. It was a very satisfying feeling. Of course, Hong Yu was speechless. What do you mean? Magic Pen said in a deep voice. Do you suspect that the filth entered Artoria's body through this wound and controlled her to become evil? This is just a guess, I don't have any more information. Guhan helped Artoria put on her wedding dress. I still need more observations and experiments to confirm my guess. Are you going to take off all of Artoria's clothes and study her body? Hong Yu asked angrily. Of course not. Guhan shook his head and added, maybe in the future, although there were some accidents on the way. Before the first universe level, Yuan Ku, caught up with Guhan and the others, they still rushed to the first safety point marked on the map. It was an underground air raid shelter built in an unknown era. Although the air raid shelter had been abandoned for many years, it still had all kinds of equipment. Not only did it have beds, furniture, electric lights, but there was also a generator, a refrigerator, a computer, a game console, fitness equipment, and a series of other props. In the back cave of the air raid shelter, there was even a lot of food and supplies stored. According to Magic Pen's research, this air raid shelter was one of the small secret strongholds used by Yangjing City to investigate Yuan Ku's movements and intelligence a few years ago. There were 3 to 5 sword-bearers stationed here all year round to collect intelligence and detect Yuan Ku's movements. Their main task was to detect whether there was a large-scale gathering of Yuan Ku's forces. If there was, it meant that a new wave of attacks was about to begin, and Yangjing City had to be prepared to defend to the death. For some reason, this stronghold was abandoned a few years ago, but all kinds of equipment were still intact. The most important thing was that the crystal wall shield was still in a normal state. The crystal wall shield was different from the dimensional wall that protected the base city. It was a unique defense method for every stronghold in the wilderness. It could isolate all kinds of energy flow. The energy outside the shield could not enter, and the energy outside the shield could not flow out. This way, not only could this stronghold maintain a good living environment that was warm in the winter and cool in the summer, but it could also make all kinds of strange search magic, telekinesis, radar, and other methods of Yuan Ku ineffective. When Magic Pen reactivated the crystal wall shield, it meant that the U-level Yuan Ku, who was tracking Artoria, would lose his sense of Artoria, and the pursuit of Guhan and the others would be interrupted. Sure enough, when Magic Pen skillfully injected sword essence into the core of the crystal wall shield, a light blue layer of crystal wall shield enveloped the entire stronghold. System notification. The first U-level Yuan Ku who started the pursuit has lost his sense of Artoria. You are safe for the time being. However, please be careful. Yuan Ku is less than 50 kilometers away from you. He has already mobilized the surrounding Yuan Ku to search for you. You are at risk of being exposed at any time. The crystal wall shield can isolate long-distance energy communication, but it can't isolate Yuan Ku from searching with his naked eyes. Therefore, it is not safe for Guhan and the others to stay here. After a short rest, they must find a way to leave this place and get away from that U-level Yuan Ku. Sikong, as usual, go and fix that communication device. Magic Pen found a set of communication devices left here, but this set was the same as the one in Wudangju Zone. It was damaged and needed to be repaired. While Yu Sikong was repairing the communication device, Guhan looked at Artoria in his arms and sighed. This girl's white wedding dress was still pure white, and in about 10 minutes, it would completely turn black. At that time, a new battle would begin. Here, didn't you want to drink water? Hongyu handed a bottle of Laoshan white snake grass water to Guhan. This was a magical drink that made people feel as if they had reached the end of the world and the universe had exploded. It was said that before the apocalypse, this drink was voted as the most disgusting drink in China. Other than those who liked novelty, very few people were interested in Laoshan white snake grass water. Therefore, this drink didn't sell well and was on the verge of bankruptcy. However, with the beginning of the apocalypse and the appearance of the sword-bearers, the scene changed dramatically. There was a sword wielder who was facing an attack from a Yuan Shen that was far more powerful than him. He was already on the verge of death when he found a bottle of Laro Mountain white flower snake grass water and drank it in one gulp. Therefore, the sword-bearer's combat power instantly increased by 10 times and killed the powerful Yuan Ku with one strike. Well, those were just the manufacturer's advertisements. In terms of actual effects, the sword-bearers all reported that after drinking the Laoshan white-flowered snake grass water, they would be able to focus their attention and instantly change their mental energy. In short, it would make their entire body become excited, and their combat strength would more or less increase. Therefore, this Laoshan white snake grass water became a must-have drink for the sword-bearers in the wild. This small stronghold was no exception, and there were more or less a few bottles left. Thank you. Guhan took the bottle and drank it in one gulp. He felt as if he was floating in the air. What a magical taste. Guhan held the bottle playfully, considering whether he should give some to Artoria. Along the way, she hadn't stopped craving water. I've fixed it. Yu Sikong walked to the door with the communication device. He inserted the antenna of the communication device through the crystal barrier so that the signal could be transmitted to Yangjing City. The first time he came to this stronghold, Yu Sikong had suffered from this. After activating the crystal barrier, he kept trying to contact Yangjing City, but he didn't receive any signal. After working for an hour, Hongyu reminded him that this crystal barrier not only blocked the search of the U-level Yuan Ku, but it also blocked the connection between the stronghold and the base city. Hello, is this Yangjing City? We are members of the Yaoguang team. We have important information to report to the base city. Please let the higher-ups talk to us immediately. What, Office Director? That's not enough. It has to be at least a member of the Standing Committee of the Sword Committee. Yes, we saved the U-level Yuan Ku, Artoria, one of the 10 kings of the Martyr's Palace. She was willing to surrender to us and provide us with a lot of valuable information. We are not crazy, this is the truth. We're currently in safe stronghold number 6524. We're safe for now, but there's another universe-level Yuanshan chasing after us. I'm requesting the headquarters to immediately send reinforcements. Yes, understood, let's try. This was the 12th time Yu Sikong repeated this conversation. The base city didn't believe Yu Sitsong's words at all, and they weren't willing to send reinforcements. Especially after hearing that the U-level Yuan Ku was nearby, they rejected the rescue request even more. In the words of the base city, the only sword-bearer in Yangjin was the cabinet master of the sword firmament, who couldn't leave. The other sword-bearers were not in the city and couldn't be deployed. That was why Jiyu Han and the others were confident that they could find a way to leave. However, the base city still gave Yu Sikong good news. They said that there was a small teleportation portal 15 kilometers northwest of Stronghold 6524. It was a portal used by the Western Temple to transfer Yuan Ku. During the previous investigation, the sword-bearers had found it and recorded the information. The teleportation portal was used by the Western Temple to transfer troops quickly. They had set up many such portals in various parts of the world, so they could quickly transfer troops all over the world. However, this teleportation portal wasn't only used by the Western Temple's Yuan Ku, but also by the sword-bearers. Guhan and the others could use this portal to teleport to other places thousands of kilometers away. In short, it was the best way to escape from the U-level Yuan Ku. It was also the only way. System notification, Mission 7, Escape from the Pursuit completed. You have reached the first safe point and contacted Yangjing City. You have obtained a way to escape from the pursuit. Dungeon completion rate, 60%. System notification, Mission 8, Go through the small teleportation portal. Go through the small teleportation portal to the next safe point. Please note that Yuan Ku has set up a protective force near the teleportation portal. Please do not get entangled with them. Special reminder, it is recommended to confirm King Arthur's status before you leave. Everyone, let's release the Sword Maidens again. It's time again. Magic Pen was the first to release the Sword Maidens, followed by Yu Sikong, Yu Siyu, Hong Yu, and Steel Melon Meat Bomb. They formed a circle and surrounded Guhan and Artoria. Military Governor, don't waste time. The most brutal battle is about to begin, Magic Pen said in a deep voice. I understand. Guhan nodded. He put down Artoria and held the King Yu sword tightly in his hand. At this moment, Artoria's wedding dress was completely black. It was just like her pupils that suddenly opened. Chapter 158. Sect Master. Magic Pen's team has already come out of King Arthur's betrayal. Tai Peng, the person in charge of intelligence for Yaoguang's sword faction who had appeared in Chapter 27, hurried to Yaoguang's side and slowly reported the latest information. Yaoguang hung up the call on his personal terminal. I know. I just hung up the call with Magic Pen. I know the situation of this clearing. You don't need to waste time. Just repeat it to me. Yaoguang waved his hand. Tell me, what's the situation with Nine State Sword Faction and Hung Mountain Sword Faction? Yes. According to our insider information, Nine State Sword Faction and Hung Mountain Sword Faction are like us, still stuck at the 60% progress bar. However, I heard that Nine State Sword Faction invited Watermelon Gentleman, who ranked first in the list of famous swords, virtual list, to join the clearus. It was said that the first time they besieged the corrupted Artoria, they fought for a full 30 minutes and took away 40% of her HP. That's twice our team's HP. Tai Peng's eyes shone. Sect Master, Steel Mang told everyone that this military governor is capable, but he doesn't know how to command. From the beginning to the end, it was Magic Pen who commanded. We paid such a high price and used a sword mark crystal worth tens of millions to give to him. Will this deal? That's not something you should be concerned about. Yao Guang threw a book in his hand to Tai Peng. Go, put him in the sect's treasury. The sect's treasury was a building that every sect must have. There were many good things in the game stored inside. However, these things were not refreshed by the game itself. Instead, they were placed there by the management to reward their own sect members. By completing various sect quests or helping the sect achieve certain achievements that would increase their reputation, they could obtain some sect contribution points. These contribution points could be used to exchange for various items in the sect's treasury. This was one of the benefits of the sect. This is. Tai Peng took the book and looked at it. The words Heaven Reliant Sword were written on it. Strange. When did Sect Master get the token of Heaven Reliant Sword? Why do you want me to put it in the sect's treasury? Tai Mang shook his head in confusion. Sect leader, how many sect contribution points is this book worth? Tai Mang chased after Yao Guang and asked. That's quite a lot. Just set it at 1 million sect contribution points. Ha ha ha. Yao Guang laughed and left, leaving behind a confused Tai Peng. 1 million sect contribution points. My Emperor Sword of Firmament, this should be the most expensive thing in the treasury. The problem was, this was merely a treasure sword level keepsake, and it wasn't even a complete set. Even if she was number 1 in the treasure sword level, it wouldn't be worth more than 1 million. Lord Magic Brush has only accumulated less than 600,000, right? Is there anyone who can exchange for this token? Boss Military Governor, add me as a friend. I'm very strong. Boss Military Governor, add me as a friend. I have a younger sister who adores you. She really wants to meet you. Boss Military Governor. Do you need a leg pendant? I'm a super leg pendant that adds 100 points of luck. After exiting the instance dungeon, a series of messages flooded Guhan's screen. After joining Yao Guang's sword sect, a large sword sect chat channel appeared at the bottom of his line of sight. A series of golden words with the words Military Governor continuously refreshed Guhan's sect chat channel. It was like Tetris at 100 times the normal speed. Naturally, Guhan wasn't interested in these private messages. However, after receiving so many benefits from Yao Guang, not saying a word would make him look unprofessional. Thus, Guhan typed in the sect chat channel, "Thank you for your concern, everyone. I'm very busy right now and don't have time to answer your questions. Please don't at me anymore. Thank you, everyone." Then, he turned off the sect chat channel. Out of sight, out of mind. That message was quickly refreshed like a sea. God knew how many people saw Guhan's message. The battle with the defiled Artoria before leaving the instance dungeon had exhausted Guhan from head to toe. After the instance dungeon, many things had accumulated in Guhan's mind. The fire that was seduced by Artoria had exhausted Guhan. He didn't want to stay in the game anymore. He wanted to return to reality to rest. Right, it seemed that Yuzhong University had classes tomorrow. Guhan had to go. Every Yuzhong University class was extremely important and he couldn't miss it. Therefore, Guhan sent a message to Magic Pen and Yao Guang, explaining that he had something urgent to do tomorrow and couldn't participate in the instance dungeon raid. After that, he clicked on the exit interface and prepared to leave the game. Suddenly, a call came in. Guhan looked at it and saw that it was from Yao Guang. "Hello, is this Mr. Military Governor? I've heard about the situation in the instance dungeon from Magic Pen. Thanks to Mr. Military Governor's excellent performance, the battle this time lasted 15 minutes longer than the last time. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Military Governor." "You're welcome. I'm just doing my part. Besides, this is just an experiment. If there are no accidents, the next time, I'll be able to pass 60%. "Is that so? Then Yao Guang thanks Mr. Military Governor in advance. I'll wait for Mr. Military Governor's good news." At this point, Yao Guang paused. "Right, since this is your first day in our Yao Guang sword sect, Mr. Military Governor, you should take a look around and explore more. Especially our sect's treasury. There are many rare treasures. Maybe there's something that military governor wants. Here are some sect contribution points. Mr. Military Governor, don't be shy. Take them and use them. You can exchange them for anything you want. After saying that, Yaoguang hung up the call. Guhan could hear hurried footsteps coming from beside Yaoguang. It seemed that someone was looking for Yaoguang. System notification. Your sect master Yaoguang has given you 1 million sect contribution points. You can use the sect contribution points to use in the sect. He actually gave 1 million. Guhan once again expressed his admiration for Yaoguang's generosity. This was 1 million sect contribution points. Ordinary sect members would only accumulate tens of thousands of points after working hard for their entire lives. Yaoguang had given him 1 million in one go. Was he not afraid that he would empty out the sect's treasury? Guhan shook his head. Since it was already in his hands, he would go to the sect's treasury to see if there were any treasures worth exchanging for. The Yaoguang Sword sect's treasury was in the Yaoguang Sword sect's encampment, Chicago. Guhan used the quantum teleportation gate to teleport to the encampment. In order not to attract any trouble, Guhan specially wore a hat so that the scar on his face would not be so eye-catching. In the encampment, members of the Yaoguang Sword sect came and went in a hurry. No one noticed Guhan wearing a hat. Very smoothly, Guhan arrived at the sect's treasury. As this was originally the University of Chicago's gymnasium, the interior of the gymnasium was filled with all sorts of treasures. Non-management personnel were not allowed to enter. Ordinary members could browse through the list of treasures on the hundreds of computers in the service area and use their sect contribution points to exchange for the items they wanted. Once the exchange was confirmed, there would be robots that would automatically deliver the item to their hands. It was very convenient. At this moment, there were not many people in the service area. There were dozens of empty computers. Guhan randomly found one and sat down. He opened up the list of treasures and set the order to go from highest to lowest. A long list of items appeared. Looking at the numbers, there were over 30,000 different items placed in the sect's treasury. The first item was the Inherent Barrier, Yama Palace, which was worth 800,000 sect contribution points. Looking at the item's description, this was a powerful barrier that could cause the murderous Pathsword Mistress to fear the enemy's attacks. It was no wonder that it was ranked first in the treasury, worth 800,000 sect contribution points. Guhan noticed that the contributor to this barrier was Sect Master Yaoguang. For a moment, Guhan was a little tempted. He wanted to use 800,000 sect contribution points to exchange for this barrier. However, Guhan still held back because there was no murderous Pathsword Mistress in the list that Guhan planned for himself. Moreover, the murderous path was an unconventional path after all. Those Gendi who had a tragic ending were mostly Gendi who had the murderous Path Emperor sword. The second item worth 600,000 sect contribution points was a set of spiritual sword level tokens. That's right, it was a set of spiritual sword mistress tokens, a set of 10. Although it was only a spiritual sword mistress that was ranked at the bottom of the spiritual sword record, if such a set of tokens was put on the auction house, it would be impossible to get it without at least 15 or 16 million sect contribution points. Seeing that the contributor to this set of tokens was Land Sungjiang, Ji Han suddenly understood. This Land Sungjiang was said to have experimented with no less than 20 sets of spirit sword level tokens, but all of them were unsuccessful. The remaining set in his hand was given to the sect as a reward. This was not a strange thing. He had too much money, so his balls hurt. In fact, ever since this set of tokens was placed in the sect's treasury, the news spread like wildfire. At least thousands of famous spiritual sword-level sword-bearers joined the Yaoguang Sword sect for this set of tokens, hoping that one day they could accumulate enough sect contribution points to exchange for this set of tokens. Collecting a set of spiritual sword-level tokens was really too painful. How many people could not collect a set of tokens in their lifetime? Unfortunately, Guhan simply did not fancy this spiritual sword mistress. Otherwise, those famous spiritual sword-level sword-bearers who ran around all day long for this set of tokens would be greatly disappointed. Guhan looked down at some other things, but there were no treasures that were worthy of his attention. Guhan was thinking that he might as well exchange it for some sword scar crystals or sword essence pills. Suddenly, the entire screen refreshed a bit, and a notification popped up. A new item had been added to the treasury. At the same time, the menu that had been pulled down to the back was refreshed back to the top. The words Heavenly Sword Secret Manual is worth 1 million sect contribution points. Contributor, Iron Centipede deeply pierced into Guhan's eyes, making Guhan speechless for a long time. Do you want to sell a personal favor to me? Guhan smiled. A spiritual sword level token is worth at most 100,000, and you actually have the nerve to set it at 1 million sect contribution points. Aren't you afraid that I'll exchange it for your inherent barrier? Yaoguang, oh Yaoguang, you really think highly of me, Guhan. Without any hesitation, Guhan decisively clicked on the exchange button for the Heavenly Sword Secret Manual. 1 million sect contribution points came and went quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was exchanged for a Heavenly Swords token, which was then sent to Guhan's hands by a robot. It happened so quickly that no one in the sect realized that an item worth 1 million gold coins had appeared in the treasury and was instantly exchanged for it. Wait. Guhan, who was about to log off, suddenly froze. How did Yaoguang know that I wanted the Heavenly Sword's secret manual? In his eyes, I should already be a famous spiritual sword-level sword-bearer. Yaoguang, oh Yaoguang, I, Guhan, think highly of you. Chapter 159. When Guhan woke up from his sleep, he felt something soft on his face. There was also a magical smell that rushed into Guhan's mouth and nose. When he opened his eyes, he saw a small but wrapped in a blue and white striped cotton underwear. It just happened to sit on Guhan's face. Guhan was actually drugged and raped. Qingpin, you've gone too far. Once again, he grabbed Qingpin's neck and turned her to face him. Sure enough, this cute girl was still dreaming. There was a drop of sparkling saliva hanging from the corner of her mouth. Accidentally, this droplet of saliva dripped into Guhan's mouth. I'm too lazy to care about you. Guhan threw Qingpin back on the bed. He found that the clothes on his lower abdomen were wet. It was probably caused by Qingpin's saliva. Guhan shook his head and opened his wardrobe. He planned to change clothes for himself. However, he was surprised to find that the wardrobe that originally contained underwear had been replaced with socks and underwear. Guhan opened a few more wardrobes, but he didn't find any underwear. Mayun, where's my underwear? Guhan shouted unhappily at the living room. When Mayun quickly ran in. When she saw that Guhan was looking for clothes, she apologized repeatedly. I'm sorry, master. Your wardrobe is too messy. Mayun took advantage of the time when you were playing games to tidy it up for you. Forget it. Find my underwear. Guhan knew that Wen Mayun was just fulfilling her duty, so he didn't say anything more to Wen Mayun. Yes, master. Mayun has put all your undergarments into the wardrobe below. As she spoke, Wen Mayun bent down and opened the clothes below to look for undergarments for Ji Yuhan. As a result, this posture caused Wen Mayun's maid dress to be affected by gravity, and it very naturally slid down. The full buttocks that were wrapped in black lace also naturally fell into Guhan's eyes. In an instant, Guhan thought back to the instant's dungeon. When Artoria was restrained, her lower body was raised. Suddenly, a certain part of her body stood up. Then, an urge to push down Wen Mayun in front of him and wantonly humiliate her almost made Guhan instantly transform into a demon. Damn it, what's wrong with this body? Guhan used a lot of willpower to suppress that impulse. At this time, when Mayun finally found Guhan's underwear, she turned around and handed it to Guhan. Hey, that's strange. The moment when Mayun turned around, she seemed to feel something hard hitting her butt. When Mayun subconsciously looked down and saw Ji Yuhan's protruding object. When she looked up again, she saw his wet clothes. She seemed to understand something immediately. Ah! When Mayun covered her mouth, she raised her head and saw Guhan's lustful eyes. When Mayun's body trembled and she sighed in her heart. Taking the initiative to make their master feel happy, taking the initiative to satisfy all the master's mental and physical needs was the fate of an exclusive maid. Since she had chosen this path, She could not refuse it, nor could she turn back. When Mayun knelt down in front of Guhan, she stretched out one hand and wanted to take off Guhan's pants. Taking the initiative to obey was also one of the rules of exclusive maids. Instead of letting Guhan urge and order her, it was better to take the initiative and squeeze out that thing earlier. Perhaps, her master would be able to stop the desire on his mouth. What are you doing? When Mayun's hand touched Guhan's pants, Guhan seemed to be struggling in a nightmare. Almost in an instant, his whole body became drenched in sweat. His clothes seemed to have been soaked in water, stained with sweat and became wet. Leave the clothes here, you go. Guhan said such words like a beast. When Mayun was shocked and scrambled out of Guhan's bedroom. Guhan, what's wrong with you? Qingpin, who was only wearing underwear, rubbed his eyes and stood up from the bed. With a precise jump, he jumped into Guhan's arms. A cool air poured from Guhan's chest into Guhan's limbs. The beast-like desire was instantly suppressed by this cool air. Guhan also woke up from the nightmare. Qingpin, thank you. Guhan hugged Qingpin tightly in his arms and fiercely rubbed against him. If it wasn't for Qingpin just now, Guhan would have suspected that he was going to turn into a beast. It hurts, stinky Guhan, you're hurting Qingpin. Guhan's mysterious ancestor left 3 secret manuals for Guhan. Everyone knew about the first one. It was the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, which was commonly used for freezing cold. The sword technique in this secret manual had already been practiced to the point of perfection. It had reached a higher level and was exquisite. This was also the foundation of Guhan's ability. The second one was known to everyone in the previous chapters. It was called 3 Green Lotus Swords. It was the sword technique that Guhan was currently practicing. Although 3 Green Lotus Swords was 3 times less than 9 Swords of Mysterious Heaven, its power was more than 3 times stronger than 9 Swords of Mysterious Heaven. Once Guhan mastered it, as long as he had enough sword essence, he estimated that he could use 3 Green Lotus Swords to fight all sword-bearers below the Emperor's sword level without a problem. Even Emperor's sword-level sword-bearers might have a fighting chance. However, 3 Green Lotus Swords was far more difficult than 9 Swords of Mysterious Heaven. Guhan only spent 7 years to master 9 Swords of Mysterious Heaven. However, 5 years had passed since then, and he hadn't even finished practicing the general principle of the 3 Swords of Green Lotus once. More than half of the acupuncture points were still unable to be broken through. This situation changed after Ji Han became the sword holder. With the increasing amount of sword essences, Ji Han had more and more sword essences to break through these meridians. Some of the meridians that he couldn't break through in the past had also been forcibly broken through. Seeing that Ji Han was about to master the general mental cultivation method of the 3 Green Lotus sword style, when he was about to reach the entry level of the sword art, the problem of his body being unable to control his desire appeared. Yes, Guhan suspected that the reason why his body was in such a situation when he was facing Artoria and when Mayun was because his 3 Green Lotus swords was getting more and more profound. The sword technique 3 Green Lotus swords was very clear: Green Lotus Hellfire, Hellfire Green Lotus, Hellfire Rages, Heart Springs Boil, Hellfire is not extinguished, sword technique is not complete. It seemed that if he wanted to master Green Lotus swords, there would be hellfire. But if he did not extinguish the hellfire, he would not be able to master the sword technique. This was really a contradictory proposition. Today was the second day of class for Guhan, Song Hammer, and the others. Song Hammer had been waiting for Guhan at the entrance of Yuzhong University. Of course, he was not tired. He was held in Cast Cloud Iron's arms, enjoying the warmth. But it was not until the class was about to start that Guhan rushed over, feeling a little tired. Toad Song. Sister Cast Cloud Iron, hello. The first person to greet them was not Guhan, but Qingpin, who was in the infant pouch on his chest. She waved her little hands and greeted Song Hammer and Cast Cloud Iron. After Ji Han fainted in the battle and was admitted to the hospital, Song Hammer, Fleeting Time Lin, and their Lady of the Sword played with Penniless Sword for a long time. They even brought Penniless Sword out for a meal at Chanel. Thus, Penniless Sword became familiar with Song Hammer and the Cloudcast Steel. Qingpin, you have become cuter again. Song Hammer stretched out a hand, wanting to touch Qingpin's little face, but Qingpin's head shrunk back and hid in the pouch. Other than Guhan, no one is allowed to touch Qingpin's head. This made Song Hammer feel very awkward. Ignore her, she's just throwing a tantrum. Guhan laughed. His words dissolved Song Hammer's awkwardness. Sour Popsicle, there's something wrong with your face. Didn't you sleep well last night? Song Hammer smiled wretchedly and poked Guhan's waist. Hey, did you get squeezed too much by your personal maid last night? Song Hammer's words did not make Guhan angry or embarrassed. Instead, it made another person unhappy. She patted Song Hammer's head and asked stiffly, Dear friend, do you want to be squeezed too? Do you want Cast Cloud Iron to help you? Hee hee. Just kidding. Just kidding. Song Hammer immediately gave up. With Cast Cloud Iron and Song Hammer's entire family around, Song Hammer's personal maid was very comfortable and safe. She did not have to worry about her chastity. However, it was said that Song Hammer's personal maid was not very happy about this. She felt that this deprived her of the opportunity to soar in the sky and become a phoenix, successfully changing from a personal maid to a mistress. Everyone has their own thoughts and pursuits. We cannot use the moral high ground to make irresponsible remarks. Guhan and Song Hammer talked to each other as they arrived at the classroom. After a while, the form teacher, Luo Fan, also entered the classroom. However, when Luo Fan arrived, Liuonian Ling, one of the three people from before, did not appear in the classroom. Ao Lin has something to attend to today. She won't be able to attend class today. She has applied for leave from me, so there will only be 29 students in class today. Luo Fan's first sentence made it clear that Fleeting Cold would not be able to attend class. Regarding this, the students began to discuss. Asking for leave on the second class of the semester, this Ao Lin was really arrogant. However, when they thought about how she was already a sword wielder and possessed such a powerful Tianwen sword, such an arrogant reason seemed to be very normal. Even the form teacher was only a sword wielder. How much restraint could such a class have on Ao Lin? Although the rules of this world were strict, geniuses could always be treated with tolerance. Regarding Ao Lin's absence, Guhan expressed that he was very happy. After all, he still owed her 3 million. The income from yesterday's strategy posts had plummeted to less than 200,000. After returning the 7 million to the school's hospital, Guhan's accumulated savings were less than 2 million. He really could not return Liuonian Ling's fees in such a short period of time. At the same time, the form teacher, Luo Fan, stood on the podium and said the main topic of this class. Today, we will learn how to leave a deep sword mark. Chapter 160. As we all know, after a sword maiden is synchronized, it's a one-time deal. There's basically no possibility of a replacement, unless you can get your hands on a peerless divine item like the green silk cutter. Luo Fan said on the podium, his spittle flying everywhere. Then, after a sword maiden is synchronized, is there any way to further improve the sword maiden's strength? Of course there is. Luo Fan slammed the table fiercely, expressing his imposing manner. The method is to use deep sword scars. From rank 9 to rank 1, as the sword scars deepen, the sword maiden's strength will continue to increase. It's even possible for her to be on par with a sword maiden of a higher level. Sword scars are sword-shaped creations produced in the sword maiden's body after the sword maiden and the sword wielder are synchronized. Under the control of the sword wielder, it can travel between the sword maiden and the sword wielder's body. Through the sword scars, the sword maiden can be commanded, contacted, and so on. I believe everyone understands this very well, so I won't explain further. The so-called deep sword scars is to strengthen the sword maiden's body and abilities with the power of the sword maiden, which is represented by the sword scars, so that the sword maiden can be more powerful. There are many benefits to deep sword scars. First, after deep sword scars, the sword maiden's basic attributes such as attack, defense, and agility can be increased, so that the attack power of 100 quarks of sword essence will be greater, the energy of the defensive shield will be greater, and the dodging ability will be higher. Second, after deep sword scars, the sword maiden's physical fitness will be improved by a considerable amount. For example, if a sword maiden without deep sword scars can lift a motorcycle, then a sword maiden with deep sword scars of rank 1 will be able to lift an SUV. According to experimental calculations, each deep sword scars can improve the original basic physical fitness by another 20%. Don't underestimate this 20%. After 9 deep sword scars and reaching the limit of rank 1, compared to the original physical fitness without deep sword scars, the original physical fitness will be improved by a full 5 times. This is almost like a complete transformation. Third, every 3 deep sword scars can activate the skills contained in the Sword Maiden's body. All of you who play Sword Maiden online know that in the game, there are 4 skills: basic skills, passive skills, advanced skills, and ultimate skills. It was the same in real life. Sword Maiden also had 4 skills. However, they can only use the weakest of their basic skills. As they continue to deepen their mastery, their skills will also be unlocked. Once they unlock their ultimate skills, the power of the Sword Maiden will become extremely terrifying. For example, my teacher's Blazing Brilliance sword. Once it reaches the first rank, it will unlock a powerful ultimate skill, Son of Heaven's Death. TSK. After using this skill, Blazing Brilliance will be immune to all debuff skills. All attack power will be increased by 200%, and durability will be maintained at 5%. The sword mistresses of the surrounding party members will also be able to increase their skills by 30%, and similarly, their durability will be maintained at 5%. No matter how bad the situation is, as long as Lai Huang uses the death of the Son of Heaven and State, it is possible to reverse the entire situation in one fell swoop and eliminate all the enemy. Luo Fan said proudly, "Teacher, your Empress Lai Huang is so powerful. May I ask if Empress Lai Huang has already unlocked her ultimate skill?" In the classroom, a student raised his hand and asked, "Well, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more." A drop of sweat appeared on Luo Fan's forehead. It was not as simple as just a little bit more. Forget about the ultimate skill, even if it was an advanced skill, his Blazing Brilliance had not been unlocked in time. Cough, cough. Next, I will talk about the method of deep sword scars. This is also the most important part of this lesson. Now, everyone, stand up and follow me to the cultivation classroom. The cultivation classroom was very big and very spacious. There was nothing inside, only mattress-sized cushions on the ground. Counting them, there were exactly 30 of them. One for each student, so it was perfectly fine. Now, I will explain to you how to deep sword scars. However, I need a student to cooperate with me. Is there anyone who is willing to cooperate with me? Luo Fan asked with a smile. Many students who were diligent in their studies raised their hands. However, Luo Fan's eyes did not even stop on them. He directly looked at Guhan, who was hiding at the back without saying a word. "That last student, I see that you are not enthusiastic. How can this be? Come over to me and help me demonstrate the process of deep sword scars." Luo Fan definitely called out Guhan's name on purpose. He still had a deep grudge against Guhan for scamming him of more than 80,000 at Chanel. Since Guhan's name was called out, Guhan did not hesitate and directly walked to Luo Fan's side. Anyway, Guhan had already memorized the method and process of deep sword scars in real life. He was very experienced. Even if Luo Fan tried to play some tricks, Guhan was not afraid of him. "Student Guhan, sit here. And your sword lady, cute Lady Qingpin, don't always stay in student Guhan's pocket. Come out more often. Come, Qingpin sword lady, sit opposite student Guhan. Try to be as close to student Guhan as possible. Students, don't laugh. This distance is very important. Don't let the sword lady be too far away from your body. This is because there is a distance limit when you control the sword scars. Once the distance is too far, the sword lady will not be able to cooperate with you, and you will be in trouble." "Yes, very good. Student Guhan, Lady Qingpin, this is the distance. Student Guhan, then close your eyes and communicate with the sword scars in your purple mansion." When he asked Guhan to close his eyes and communicate with the sword scars, Luo Fan took out a small transparent bottle from his pocket. There was some powder inside. "Students, This is the sword scars powder. Everyone is familiar with it. You should have it in the game and used it to make deep sword scars. However, the method of making deep sword scars in the game is simplified. You just need to throw the powder into your mouth and wait for the system to automatically make deep sword scars. But in reality, it is far more complicated than that. This is a set of meticulous work. However, the first step is the same. Student Guhan, please pour this bottle of powder into your mouth. Then, use your sword element to wrap this powder and transfer it to your purple mansion. This process must be done carefully. Don't be impatient. The sword scars powder wrapped by the sword element is as fragile as a bubble. If you are not careful, the powder will break and leak out. Young man, you can't get a wife if you are careless. Ha ha ha. The students laughed. Unfortunately, Guhan was not affected at all. Guhan had terrifying control over his sword element. Without any hesitation, he quickly wrapped his own sword essence around the sword mark dust, and almost ran all the way to his Zifu. Without waiting for Luo Fan to say anything, he directly let the ball of sword essence wrapped in the sword mark dust collide with the sword mark. Student Guhan, don't be nervous. Listen to my instructions and slowly spread the sword scars powder evenly on the sword scars powder. Wait for about 30 seconds, and the sword scars powder will slowly become solid. Everyone's sword ladies are ancient sword grade, and this is their first time making deep sword scars. Therefore, 1 bottle of sword scars powder will be enough for your sword scars powder to become solid, unlike treasured swords. You will need 5 bottles of sword scars powder to become solid, Luo Fan said confidently. However, a minute passed, and there was no reaction from Guhan. Student Guhan, what happened? Luo Fan smiled in satisfaction. Is it because you are too careless and did not wrap the sword element tightly, causing the sword scars powder to leak out? Yes. Guhan blushed. I missed it. Teacher, can you give me another bottle of sword element powder? Hey, young man, I told you not to be careless. Why didn't you listen? Luo Fan criticized Guhan, but he still took out a new bottle of sword element powder and handed it to Guhan. As a result, Guhan did not say anything and directly poured it into his mouth. A minute later, Guhan blushed again. He opened his eyes and continued to ask Luo Fan for more sword scars powder. Student Guhan, you are too careless. Normally, our students will succeed on the second try. You actually failed again. If you fail again, teacher will give you a failing grade. Luo Fan smiled and gave Guhan another bottle. In the end, Guhan still failed on the third try. Luo Fan mocked him happily. This was the reason why Luo Fan wanted Guhan to be his prop and be the first to make deep sword scars. According to Luo Fan's experience in class, the students who acted as his props were habitually nervous. It was very normal for things that could be done once or twice to be dragged out to 3 or 4 times. Luo Fan wanted to take this opportunity to make Guhan lose face. Well, compared to Li Shen's methods, Luo Fan's revenge was still considered a kind person. He only wanted to make Guhan fail a few more times so that he could criticize and ridicule him. In essence, there was no real harm to Guhan. Luo Fan gave him another bottle. This was the 4th bottle of sword scars powder that Guhan had used. However, this time, Guhan still failed. The 5th time, he still failed. The 6th time, he still failed. The 7th time, he failed. The 8th time, he failed. The 9th time, he failed. By the 9th time, Luo Fan could no longer ridicule him. It was not difficult to use sword essence to wrap the sword scars powder. It was just like riding a bicycle. The first time might be difficult, but once you rode it a few times, it would be as easy as walking. Anyone who could become a sword bearer was not an idiot. The stupidest student that Luo Fan had ever taught could only succeed after 5 or 6 tries. However, someone like Jiyu Han, who had failed after 9 tries, was absolutely unique. Something was wrong. What had happened in Guhan's Purple Palace? Luo Fan thought silently as he quietly waited for the result of Guhan's 10th try. Success. Guhan let out a long sigh of relief. He had finally succeeded. Chapter 161. To be honest, Guhan was also a little frightened by the situation at that time. Of course, Guhan was not like Luo Fan thought he was. He did not have insufficient control over the sword essence, which caused the sword mark dust to fall into his body. Guhan successfully sent the sword mark dust into Qingpin's sword mark on his first try. However, it did not cause any ripples and disappeared into the sword mark. Guhan was sure that he had completed every step perfectly without any mistakes. Since he did not make any mistakes, then the sword mark dust or the sword mark itself must be at fault. At this time, the homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, happened to mock Guhan for not being able to control the sword essence, so Guhan played along and directly admitted it. Anyway, admitting this would not make him lose a piece of flesh, and he could also get new sword mark dust from Luo Fan's hands. Sure enough, Luo Fan readily took out a new bottle of sword mark dust and sent it into Guhan's sword mark. The sword mark still did not show any signs of materialization. However, the originally illusory sword mark looked like it was about to solidify. Could it be that the sword mark dust is not enough? Ji Han suddenly had an idea, and the scene of continuous failure appeared in the previous chapter. From Luo Fan's pocket, he took out bottle after bottle of sword mark powder. With the continuous infusion of sword mark powder, Ji Han's sword mark also seemed to become more and more solid. Finally, after the 10th bottle of sword mark powder was poured in, Ji Han's sword mark finally flashed with a silver light and turned into a solid state in his Zifu. This was actually a very unusual thing. Even for the number 1 ancient sword, the Yixian sword, a bottle of sword mark dust was enough to materialize her sword mark. Indeed, Qingpin used a total of 10 bottles. Guhan was sure that all 10 bottles of sword mark dust were absorbed by Qingpin's sword mark. In other words, the materialization of Qingpin's sword mark was more than 10 times that of the Yixian sword. Even a sword maiden of the treasure sword rank only needed 5 bottles of sword mark dust at a moment. 10 bottles was a number that only sword ladies of famed sword rank would need. What did this mean? Did this mean that Qingpin was a famous sword mistress? However, Qingpin's stats were all at the standard of an ancient sword. What was the secret behind this? Guhan did not know, finally succeeded. Luo Fan wiped the sweat off his forehead. This time, the school had given him 100 bottles of sword mark dust. He thought it would be enough for these little brats, but he didn't expect to use up 10 bottles on Guhan. Success. I can already see the materialized sword mark. Guhan nodded. Although he had read countless materials and tutorials, it was still a very wonderful thing to have a deep sword scar in reality for the first time. A physical sword was hidden in his body. That's right, it was a real sword that could slash people to death when pulled out. It just appeared in her body. This feeling was the same as when she was pregnant and gave birth to a poor child. It was the same feeling. Since you've succeeded, let's move on to the next step. Luo Fan breathed a sigh of relief. Student Guhan, the next step will be a little painful. However, since you've chosen to become a sword bearer, you'll have to face this pain. You must move fast. The faster you are, the less painful it will be. Next, please control the materialized sword mark in your body and let it come out. The so-called controlling the materialized sword mark to come out of the body was controlling the sword mark to cut through the skin from the inside of the abdomen. It felt like a cesarean section. The difference was that the doctor would cut open the abdomen from the outside, while the former would cut open the abdomen from the inside. Of course, the process of cutting open the abdomen would not really cause a bloody wound, so there would not be any substantial damage to the body. However, the pain of cutting open the abdomen would not disappear. Instead, it would be completely transmitted to one's mind. The excruciating pain of a laparotomy was classified as level 10 pain in the medical world, and the highest level of pain was only level 12. It could be said that this kind of pain was simply unbearable for ordinary people, and they had to be injected with anesthetics to carry out general anesthesia. However, the sword wielder couldn't use anesthetics, because once anesthetics were used, their nervous system would be paralyzed. In this way, although the pain would be blocked outside the brain, the sword wielder would also completely lose control of the sword mark. If he couldn't even control it, how could he come out? Therefore, the The sword-bearer must use his own will to bear this kind of pain. This was also a kind of training for the sword-bearer. If he could even bear level 10 pain, what was the rest of the suffering? Guhan directly controlled Qingpin's sword mark to cut open a wound on his belly. A monstrous pain instantly swept through Guhan's brain, but Guhan did not even frown. A sword light flashed, and the materialized sword mark of Qingpin's sword appeared between Guhan and Qingpin. It floated in the air and kept rotating. As for the place where the sword mark had appeared, there was only a hole in Ji Yuhan's shirt to prove that something had indeed come out of Ji Yuhan's body. However, on Ji Yuhan's stomach, there wasn't even a scar to be seen. In fact, the great pain quickly dissipated after the sword mark left the body. It was much less painful than the pain that lasted for months when the abdomen was cut open. Your Highness Qingpin, it's your turn now. Luo Fan patted the silly Qingpin's head. Now, Your Highness Qingpin, please use your will to take over the control of the sword mark in the air. Huh. Qingpin thought for a while and closed her eyes. Guhan, who was controlling the sword mark, felt a familiar thought touching her will to control the sword mark. Guhan knew that this was Qingpin's will telling her that it was time to hand over the control of the sword mark to her. Guhan nodded at Qingpin, and her will receded like the tide, allowing Qingpin to take over the control of the sword mark. In the end, Qingpin seemed to be in a hurry. After Guhan's will receded, her will did not follow quickly. As a result, the materialized sword mark almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, at the crucial moment, Qingpin's will still took control of the sword mark and made it float in the air again. Your Highness Qingpin, please control the sword mark and let it pierce into your body. Luo Fan continued to guide. Of course, it will hurt a little, but I guarantee that it will not be as painful as when your sword holder, Guhan, was stabbed. Ah! When Qingpin's chubby little face heard that it would hurt, she immediately turned pale with fright and shouted at Guhan, "Hey, Guhan will hurt. Guhan, Qingpin will hurt." When Qingpin spoke, the sword mark floating in the air also trembled. Following Qingpin's words, it moved up and down. It's all right. It's all right. What else could Guhan do? She could only stroke Qingpin's head to comfort him while secretly praying that Qingpin would not screw up at this time. Oh! A few drops of tears squeezed out of Qingpin's eyes. After discovering that Guhan was not moved by her, she could only pull up the zipper of her crocodile clothes, revealing her small belly. Only now did Guhan realize that Qingpin, this adorable fellow, was actually not wearing anything inside her crocodile clothes. Her body was just bare inside. Cough, cough. Guhan took off her clothes, blocking a part of the line of sight that might see Qingpin's cute little belly. Qingpin controlled the materialized sword mark to approach her belly. When the tip of the sword mark was less than 1 centimeter away from Qingpin's belly, Qingpin raised her head, her eyes hazy with tears. Guhan, let's go home, okay? Even if Qingpin doesn't have a deep sword mark, it is still very powerful. Qingpin is the most powerful, let's go home, okay? As she spoke, Qingpin controlled the sword mark to move away from her body again. Then, she lay on the ground and rolled around, making a scene, just like a girl in a cartoon from 1,000 years ago. This amused the surrounding students, especially Song Hammer, who laughed so hard that he was about to roll on the ground. 10 pieces of natural dongpa meat. Seeing Qingpin like this, Guhan knew that he would not be able to make this adorable fellow obediently give in without paying a price. 20. Qingpin immediately sat up and stretched out 2 fingers. Deal. A few black lines appeared on Guhan's forehead. The laughter of the surrounding students made Guhan want to return this adorable fellow again. 20. Qingpin's small face turned red, and she silently counted the number of dongpa meat to cheer herself up. Then, she suddenly used the sword mark to poke her stomach. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Qingpin cried out in pain and performed a fried dough twist on the mat. When Guhan took a closer look, he saw that the sword mark was still floating in the air, unharmed. It did not touch Qingpin at all. 30. Guhan's eyebrows began to twitch. When Qingpin heard this, she stopped rolling and sat up with a smile on her face. This time, Qingpin did not give Guhan any more trouble. The materialized sword mark was controlled by Qingpin bit by bit and stabbed into her stomach. During this process, beads of sweat the size of beans kept dripping down from Qingpin's forehead. Qingpin's underwear was also wet. It was obvious that Qingpin had endured an unimaginable amount of pain during this process. This made Guhan feel distressed from the bottom of his heart. He really wanted to immediately replace Qingpin and endure this kind of pain, but he could not do it. Tonight, I'll let Qingpin eat 50 pieces of dongpa meat, Guhan thought silently in his heart. If we have the perspective of Qingpin's body, we can see that after the materialized sword mark was inserted into Qingpin's body, it immediately became illusory again. At the same time, we can see some white things floating along with the sword mark into various parts of Qingpin's body. After all the materialized sword marks entered Qingpin's body, the sword mark completely returned to its previous illusory form. However, there was an additional blood groove on one side of the blade. This meant that the sword mark had been completed and Qingpin had officially become a level 9 sword maiden. Very good. Now, Lady Qingpin, you can return the sword mark to your sword wielder. As soon as Luo Fan finished speaking, a sword mark shot out of Qingpin's stomach and then flew back into Guhan's body. The whole process of the profound sword mark was completely over. After the demonstration of Guhan and Qingpin, the other students also began to experience the first profound sword mark in their lives. Compared to Guhan, who had consumed 10 bottles of sword mark powder, the other students had consumed at most 3 bottles. Song Hammer succeeded in one try, which made him feel a little smug in front of Guhan. It had been a long time since Song Hammer had been able to surpass Guhan in anything except the innate sword element value. Now, there was finally something that could surpass Guhan. It was too damn difficult. Chapter 162. Class 22694's profound sword scar lesson lasted for about 3 hours. After the lesson was over, the homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, felt like crying but had no tears. He had never expected that the 100 bottles of sword scar powder that he had applied for in advance would all be used up, and he had even lost 7 bottles. This was really a sad story. Luo Fan had thought that there would be more than 10 bottles left out of the 100 bottles as his profit, but now he had lost all of them. In reality, sword scar powder was not as cheap as it was in the game. A bottle of sword scar powder could be sold for 1,000 renminbi, which meant that Luo Fan had lost 7,000 renminbi in the blink of an eye. It was truly a tragedy. Students, all of you have used sword scar powder before. Do you know how it was obtained? Luo Fan lectured listlessly. He was the one who had taken the initiative to ask the students questions, and some of them had raised their hands to answer. However, Luo Fan did not even look at them as he answered his own question. Actually, sword scar powder is a derivative product of dimensional crystal ores. Dimensional crystal ores are gifts left behind for humans after the dimensional rift erupts. The larger the dimensional rift erupts, the better the quality of the dimensional crystal ores. Therefore, in the next lesson, we will be going to the dimensional crystal ore vein on Mount Mai Ling for your first practical training outside the city. The results of this practical training will determine whether you have the qualifications to enter the Swordbearer's Mission Hall. Alright, the next time you leave the city is a week later at 8 a.m. Everyone, gather in the classroom. Let me give you a piece of advice. Have a good chat with your parents and siblings before you leave the city. Write me a will while you're at it. It might come in handy. Let me tell you, the death rate of our Yuzhong Academy's first practical training out of the city has always been controlled at 10%, that is, among you, about 3 people will die in this practical training out of the city. I am not joking with you. At this point, the originally listless Luo Fan's eyes suddenly flashed a bright light. Class dismissed. Student Guhan, come with me. I have something to talk to you about. Talk to me. Guhan was stunned. Was Luo Fan planning to take revenge on him? Student Guhan, do you have any relationship with the dean? As he walked beside Luo Fan, he saw the latter frowning and asking him. In this regard, Guhan expressed that he was very puzzled. He was originally a low-class person, so how could he know the dean of Yuzhong University? I don't know him. Guhan answered very honestly. Unfortunately, looking at Luo Fan's disdainful face, he knew that he didn't believe Guhan's words at all. Let me tell you, although you have a backer, I, Luo Fan, am famous for not being afraid of the rich and powerful. You'd better prepare for your training this week. Otherwise, I won't take special care of you when we leave the city for practical training. After saying this, Luo Fan pointed to a very luxurious villa in front of him and said, "Go in, the dean is inside, and he wants to see you." After saying this, Luo Fan swaggered off. Guhan thought for a while, then patted the head of the Qingpin sword in his arms. "Let's go. Let's see what this dean wants from an insignificant person like me." Knock, knock, knock. "Dean, are you there?" After confirming the sign of the dean's office, Guhan took a deep breath and knocked on the door of the dean's office. "Is it Guhan? Come in directly, remember to close the door." The voice of a middle-aged man came from the other side of the door. Ji Han pushed the door open and then closed it. He saw a somewhat dignified man sitting on a strangely shaped chair. Beside him stood a sword maiden who had a look of disdain on her face. It was unknown whether this disdain was directed at Ji Han or the dean. Although it was Guhan's first time seeing the dean, this dean had appeared quite frequently in various news reports in Yuzhong City. He could be seen in all kinds of news and midnight interviews. Therefore, Guhan recognized this person immediately. He was the dean of Yuzhong University, Tiger of Yuzhong, Tiger Raw Sword Spirit, Daomo sit. Daomo pointed to a chair beside Guhan and gestured for Guhan to sit. Guhan didn't act pretentiously. If he could sit, he wouldn't stand. He lifted his butt and sat down. Seeing that Guhan didn't act pretentiously, Daomo nodded in satisfaction. This young man had a good temperament and was worth cultivating. "You're Guhan, right?" Daomo tapped in the air, and the room instantly turned into the scene of Guhan's battle with the demonic beast a few days ago. It also happened to be the scene where Guhan used a set of magical footwork to dodge 50 razor wings. "You're a sword master, right? Your swordsmanship isn't bad. I heard from Long Quan that you have 10% of Huaremai's abilities. Tell me, is Long Quan right?" Daomo asked with a smile. "I don't know if I have 10% of his abilities." Guhan shook his head. "Who knows if we don't really fight? It's still a question whether Huaremai Sword Spirit has 10% of my abilities, isn't it?" Daomo and Long Quan were stunned by Guhan's words. Where did this kid come from? He was so arrogant. He actually dared to doubt whether Huaremai Sword Spirit had 10% of his abilities. "Good. I like people like you. Young and bold." Daomo slammed the table. "What do you think, kid? Since you can say such arrogant words, you should at least prove yourself." "How do I prove myself?" Guhan's eyes lit up. When he pointed out that he was a sword master and Huaremai Sword Spirit, Guhan roughly guessed why this tiger of Yuzhong was looking for him. After all, the battle between Yuzhong University and Yangjing Academy had lasted for hundreds of years. The love story between them was famous far and wide. The entire human world knew about it and used it as a topic of conversation. More than 1,000 books were written about the palace fights between Yuzhong University and Yangjing Academy. There were even people who personified Yuzhong University and Yangjing Academy and made a whole series of cartoons called That Year in Yuzhong, That Year in Yangjing. They sold very well. Thinking of the upcoming 8 Academies tournament, Ji Han naturally had the idea that the dean wanted to humiliate Yangjing Academy at the 8 Academies tournament, so he had the idea of targeting him. Guhan did not reject such a thing. In fact, he was even looking forward to it. As long as he could make a name for himself at the Octagon meet, all kinds of human resources might be tilted toward him. It's very simple. Although my sword maiden, Long Quan, can't compare to Huaremai, in terms of swordsmanship, she's top-notch among the famous swordsmen. As long as you can defeat Long Quan with swordsmanship alone, I'll acknowledge your strength, Daomo said slowly. Sure. Guhan nodded and said, but what good will it do me to prove this? Dean, if there's nothing else, I'll be going back. Don't you dare. Daomo slammed the table heavily. Of course there are benefits. As long as you defeat Long Quan, Yuzhong University's resources will be tilted toward you. I'll train you to become a treasured sword wielder as soon as possible. Then, you'll represent Yuzhong University in the Octagon Meet. This is a rare opportunity. Many legendary sword wielder have made a name for themselves at the Octagon Meet. Student Guhan, the first time I saw you, I knew that you were an ambitious man. It's not wrong for a man to be ambitious. What's wrong is that he doesn't have the ability to match his ambition. Prove yourself to me, Guhan, if you want to stand at the peak of life. Guhan did not say anything. His mind was successfully seduced by Dao Mo. He was right. As long as he made a name for himself at the Octagon Meet, he, Guhan, would be one step closer to his goal of becoming an emperor sword. Qing Pin, there's work to do. Guhan grabbed the sleepy Qing Pin's neck. Qing Pin knew that this damned sword wielder Guhan wanted him to transform into his sword form again. I'll add 10 more pieces of dongpa pork tonight, Qing Pin mumbled. Although he was unhappy about this, under the temptation of the dongpa pork, he obediently transformed into his sword form and held it in Guhan's hand. Please. Guhan made a gesture to Long Quan. Long Quan rolled his eyes at Dao Mo. There was a flash of light in his hand, and the Long Quan sword appeared in his hand. Please. Long Quan felt terrible. In the first 10 moves that she had exchanged with Guhan, Long Quan felt that she was suppressing Guhan. There were a few times when she could hit Guhan. However, Guhan's slippery body technique always dodged her attacks. Slowly, Long Quan became anxious. She desperately wanted to suppress Guhan and then defeat him. This gave Guhan a chance. Guhan saw a mistake in Long Quan's anxious state and immediately countered with his sword. Long Quan turned pale with fright and quickly blocked. Although she managed to block Guhan's sword by a hair's breadth, the situation had changed from Long Quan suppressing Guhan to Guhan suppressing Long Quan. Long Quan tried to turn the situation around. However, she felt that Guhan had predicted every move she made. Every time she attacked, there would be a blade blocking in front of her. Long Quan felt that she had been seen through by Guhan. I've seen through you. Suddenly, Guhan said. Long Quan was taken aback, and Ji Yuhan's dagger shot towards Long Quan's left shoulder. Long Quan quickly parried and evaded. However, when Long Quan's body moved, she realized that something was wrong. Guhan's move was actually a feint. However, Long Quan could no longer dodge. The blade of Qing Pin's sword pierced through Long Quan's wrist and directly under her throat. The tip of the sword was right there. You've lost. Thanks for letting me win, Lady Long Quan. Guhan withdrew his sword. Qing Pin immediately turned back into a cute little guy and burrowed into Guhan's baby pouch. I'm tired. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm going to sleep. Actually, you can defeat me within 10 moves, right? Long Quan lifted her head and stared into Guhan's eyes. Are you letting me win? Not at all. Guhan shook his head sincerely. Lady Long Quan's swordsmanship is quite exquisite. Guhan only wants to secretly learn a thing or two. I don't have any other intentions. Ha ha ha, Long Quan, didn't you admit that you're no match for Guhan? You're just proving yourself now. Dao Mo patted Long Quan's shoulder. Then, he turned to Guhan. From now on, you're a good student of Yuzhong University. Long Quan, take out a 3-pole. I'll personally put it on for student Guhan. Oh, right. Didn't I tell those bastards at the hospital not to charge student Guhan's medical fees? Since he was injured in our school, the responsibility belongs to our school. Long Quan, go and tell the hospital to refund the 7 million medical fees to student Guhan. We can't let student Guhan bleed and cry. Chapter 163. How is it that you've only met the dean once and you've already got 3 poles? This world is simply too unfair. Song Hammer looked at the 3 poles on Guhan's arm with envy. This meant that Guhan had become a good student of Yuzhong University. He had many privileges in the school, such as not attending classes and not failing exams. It was a completely different situation from the good students before the apocalypse. The symbol of a good student and 3 poles meant that Guhan was one of the strongest students in Yuzhong University. Not only would he receive a lot of resources from the school, but he would also receive a lot of benefits and more attention after graduation. This was the target of envy for every student, and also the target of envy for every student. Toad, you've mastered the sword technique I taught you. You have the right to wear these 3 poles. Guhan paused. Your talent is not inferior to mine. I've told you before that you can become the sword master. Forget it, I'll leave the fighting to the sword maiden. I'll be satisfied hiding in the back. Song Hammer shook his head indifferently. He did not have the courage or interest to fight on the front lines. That's right. With Cloudcast Iron here, you only need to cheer for him from behind, my dear friend. Cloudcast Iron patted his thick chest as a guarantee. His breasts rippled. By the way, Sour Popsicle, my mother hasn't seen you in a long time. When will you come to my house? Little Dragon and Little Rabbit want to play with you again, Song Hammer suddenly said. Let's wait for a while. Guhan felt a headache when he thought of the King Arthur's betrayal dungeon. With this dungeon around, he would not be able to find time to do anything else in a short period of time. Dear Mr. Guhan, you have a refund of 6 million renminbi. It has been sent to your account. Please check it. At that moment, a refund message was sent to Ji Yuhan's personal terminal. It seemed like the hospital had refunded Ji Yuhan's medical fees at an extremely fast speed. It was not hard to imagine that a certain sword mistress must have placed a sword on some doctor's neck. After returning home, Guhan asked Wen Maiyun to buy a few hundred kilograms of pork and make 60 pieces of dongpa pork for Qingpin. It was a reward for Qingpin's hard work. Qingpin was very satisfied with Guhan's tactful action. He let go of the soft meat on Guhan's chest. Wen Maiyun responded and then stood beside Ji Yuhan, stuttering for a long time without saying a word. What's the matter? Guhan could tell that Wen Maiyun had something on her mind. Just say it, I'm not an unreasonable master. Yes. Master, Maiyun wants to take half a day off. Half a day, just half a day will do. Maiyun has some matters to settle, please be merciful, master, go. As long as you don't miss my, Qingpin's dongpa pork, you can go. Guhan readily agreed to Wen Maiyun's request. From the looks of it, she most likely wanted to see her daughter. Wen Maiyun had been in Guhan's house for almost a week. It was quite hard for her to not see her daughter for a week. After Wen Maiyun finished making lunch, she thanked Guhan profusely and left. Qingpin ran to the living room to watch cartoons after eating his fill. Guhan sat alone in his room and searched for information about King Arthur on the internet. Beep beep. A crisp sound rang out. This was the sound of a message popping up on QQ. It had been more than 1,000 years, and everything had changed except for the QQ notification sound. Guhan opened the message and saw that it was a player called That Instant Look Back in the forum's expert player group. He had sent a message to Guhan with only a few words. I've found the thing you want. That Instant Look Back was a guy who didn't speak much in the expert player group. However, Guhan knew that other than being a max-level expert on the forum, he was also an extremely skilled hacker. He had once hacked into the Sword Committee's SS-level secret vault and obtained a lot of top-secret information. When he was researching the King of Yu's Gojian sword dungeon, Guhan had asked him many times to obtain some confidential information. Of course, That Instant Look Back was not a volunteer. He had to pay for it, and the price was not cheap. The cost of the few messages from the dragon had cost Guhan half a year's worth of nutrient solution. The thing you want is SS level. I put in a lot of effort, so it's slightly higher than the agreed price. Seeing That Instant Look Back's reply, Guhan was a little surprised. After working with him for so long, this was the first time he had heard him say that he put in a lot of effort. It seemed that this trip to get the information was definitely not as simple as he had said. Sure, name your price. 300,000. Guhan didn't say anything else and transferred the money over. 300,000 for an SS-level secret information. This was a reasonable price no matter where he went. Ji Yuhan's straightforward payment made instant Hui Mao, who was on the other side of QQ, shocked. He had also worked with Guhan for so long. When did he not drag his feet when it came to payment? He delayed it for a few months before paying clearly. Like today, the transfer was completed in less than 10 seconds. However, this was the first time in his life that he had hesitated for a long time. In that instant, He glanced back and typed out such a sentence. You're rich. Yes, I've made a small fortune. Guhan answered very honestly. Oh. After typing this word, that instant look back's profile picture dimmed. This meant that he had gone offline. As a hacker, he would immediately go offline after the transaction to prevent others from finding any clues. Guhan carefully read the entire information. Some of the questions he had about King Arthur's betrayal were answered. In his heart, the method to clear the dungeon also gradually became clear. If Guhan's guess was correct, then the next time he entered the dungeon, Guhan was at least confident that he could clear at least 60% of the levels. Everything that needed to be done was done. Just after dinner, Guhan didn't dare to continue practicing 3 green lotus swords. He was deeply afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself and do something to some cute girl. He could only close his eyes and enter the world of Sword Maiden online. When he opened his eyes again, he saw King Yu sitting alone in front of the computer and laughing foolishly. Guhan went over to take a look. It turned out that this child was watching a very popular TV series recently. It was called something like From Gendi's Descendants. It was a cliched story about the 5 sword emperors having 5 descendants. These 5 descendants were filled with all sorts of hatred and love. Then, there would be all sorts of fights, all sorts of deaths. In short, the plot was very cliched, but it caused a huge wave. Even King Yu, the sword lady in the game, started to get addicted to this television series. Excuse me. I want to look for information. When Guhan saw the handsome male lead, his heart ached. He pushed King Yu's shoulder and indicated that he wanted to use the computer to look for information. Can't you go offline to look for it? Anyway, there's Qing Pin in real life. Don't worry about me. King Yu rejected Guhan without hesitation. He indicated that Guhan should go offline to look for information and not disturb him watching movies. Guhan glared and touched King Yu's butt. Don't think too much. Guhan just wanted King Yu to return the sword. If you dare to pull out my sword hilt, I won't let you off. Don't even think about seeing me for the rest of your life. King Yu clicked on the video and paused it. He put his hands on his waist and immediately confronted Guhan. The originally cold and dark Guhan suddenly couldn't withstand King Yu's unyielding aura. It was the same when facing Qing Pin. Guhan was getting more and more away from his original persona. Guhan lowered his head guiltily. His eyes involuntarily turned and looked at the computer screen. At this moment, the video was paused and a small window of advertisement was hanging on it. It was this advertisement that Guhan usually didn't even look at, but it suddenly snatched all of Guhan's attention. Go, follow me. Guhan grabbed King Yu's hand and was about to leave the sword tomb. What do you want to do? Let go of me, we're arguing. King Yu was unhappy. Arguing was the advantage. Can you not change the focus of the conflict? It's rare for me to gain the upper hand in front of you, Guhan. Stop fooling around, there's something serious. You're about to have another sister. When Guhan said this, he had already pulled King Yu out of the sword tomb. King Yu couldn't refuse anymore. You stinky military governor, who wants another sister? Qing Pin is annoying enough. King Yu thought unwillingly. Hello, welcome to the Great Windmill Auction House. The auction will officially start in 3 minutes. Please show me your invitation or ticket. At the entrance of a very luxurious and grand theater, 4 beautiful receptionists stood side by side. They welcomed Guhan with smiles and gently stopped Guhan's attempt to enter. I don't have an invitation. Your tickets also stopped selling in 7 minutes. Guhan sighed, but I really want to go in. For my sake, let me in. Your face. The receptionist smiled awkwardly. Why were there so many people with scars on their faces recently? Was it a new trend? Did they think they were the same as military governor just because they had a few scars on their faces? Sorry, you don't have an invitation or ticket on your face, I can't let you in, the receptionist said formally. Is that okay? Guhan brainlessly put his name on top of his head. At the same time, the shining King Yugo stomps on the sword dungeon's #1 blinded everyone's eyes. It really is military governor. The receptionist was also shocked. She immediately bowed and said, I'll ask the supervisor immediately. Please wait a moment. A minute later, the receptionist ended the call and bowed 3 times to Guhan in one breath. The smile on her face became even wider. I'm sorry, Mr. Military Governor. Our supervisor said that all the seats are full. We can't let you in. Why don't you come back for the next auction? In fact, the place was not full at all. There were still many empty seats. However, the supervisor of the Great Windmill Auction House did not care about the military governor at all. He muttered, he's just a has-been internet celebrity. He wants to show his face here? No way. Guhan's face turned red. He thought that by using his name, he could gain some special privileges. He didn't expect to be humiliated instead. There's no other way. I can only look for Yaoguang. Guhan picked up his personal terminal and planned to call Yaoguang. Mr. Military Governor. Hello. A timid voice suddenly greeted Guhan. Guhan took a look and saw that it was a cute little girl. Chapter 164. Who was the person that Guhan knew? Most people would guess that it was Yaoguang. Back then, Mingyu. Actually, it wasn't. It was a person that Guhan hadn't even met once. However, her name left a deep impression on Guhan. True Everlasting Nation. I don't know if the readers have any impression of this name. I think most of them don't, but Guhan had a deep impression of this name. That was because she was the first player that spent money to read the guide that Guhan posted using his alternate account, Military Governor 12580, and rewarded Guhan 588. She was the only player that subscribed to and rewarded Guhan's post before Guhan's interview. Naturally, Guhan had a deep impression of this name. Guhan still remembered that he wanted to add her as a friend and thank her. In the end, she banned him from adding her, which was very awkward. Guhan sized up the child. She looked to be about the same age as Guhan. She wore a beautiful princess dress and wore a big red flower on her head. She was a very cute and beautiful girl. Hello. Are you really Mr. Military Governor? True Everlasting Nation was very excited to see Guhan in person. She was so excited that she danced. Mr. Military Governor, your guide is really amazing. I read it more than 10 times. I followed your instructions and successfully obtained an SSS rating for King Yu's Gojian Sword Instance Dungeon. I'm so excited. This girl actually obtained an SSS rating. Guhan was shocked. Even though he read his guide, it only increased the time by about 40 minutes. The real difficulty was how to defeat Steel Tooth in the remaining 15 minutes. Although he had Kunzu and King Yu as his helpers, King Yu had completely forgotten about his sword skills. It would be good if he didn't cause trouble for the players. This True Everlasting Nation was able to reach SSS rating. She definitely had a strong side. She wasn't someone to be underestimated. Hello, Miss True Everlasting Nation. I remember you. Guhan reached out a hand. You are the first person to subscribe to my post. I am very grateful for your subscription and tips. Really? Does Mr. Military Governor really remember me? I'm so excited. True Everlasting Kingdom became excited again. He hurriedly wanted to shake Guhan's outstretched hand. However, just as he was about to shake it, his face darkened and he retracted his hand. I'm sorry, Mr. Military Governor. I did some dirty things just now, so my hands are a little dirty. I won't shake your hand, I'm fine. It's no big deal. Without saying a word, Guhan took the initiative to grab True Constant Country's hand, which was about to retract, and shook it with force. Thank you for the tip. Thank you again, Guhan said very sincerely. Mr. Military Governor. True Constant Country shrunk back like a frightened rabbit. Her face was red for a long time. Suddenly, loud music could be heard in the auction hall. This meant that the auction had officially started. Mr. Military Governor, why are you stopping here? Did you encounter some difficulties? True Constant Country asked with her head lowered. Yes. Guhan nodded honestly. I wanted to go in, but this lady told me that it's already full. So, I can't go in. Full? True Constant Country was stunned. She took out her personal terminal and tapped on it a few times. Immediately, Her expression changed. Her expression turned fierce. How dare you? There are clearly 1/3 of the seats in the auction hall. You actually dare to lie with your eyes closed. You actually dare to let the Honorable Mr. Military Governor wait outside and refuse to let him in. Who gave you such courage? True Constant Country shouted fiercely at the greeter at the entrance, scaring the pitiful long-legged lady into a ball. Was the current True Constant Country still the shy little girl from before? You can get lost now. I hereby announce that from now on, you are no longer a member of the Great Windmill Auction House. True Constant Country didn't waste any time and directly sentenced the long-legged lady to death. Don't, Missy, don't, Missy. I didn't say that. Director Chen made me say that. Actually, I admire Mr. Military Governor a lot. I'm also his fan. But Director Chen said that we shouldn't let this kind of fading celebrity insult the reputation of the Great Windmill Auction House. For the sake of her job, this long-legged lady didn't hesitate to sell out Director Chen. Really? Did Director Chen say that? True Constant Country's expression softened. In that case, just stand here. If what you said is true, I'll let you off today. What are you standing here for? Hurry up and open the door. Invite Mr. Military Governor in. A few minutes later, Ji Han and the True Everlasting Kingdom were seated in a private room on the top floor of the auction house. This was the best private room in the Great Windmill Auction House. It was more than 100 square meters in size, with a sofa, a coffee table, fruits, snacks, a television, and so on. There was even a bed and a chair in the room. It was unknown what kind of dirty thoughts the designer of this private room had in mind when he put it there. When she was with Gu Han, this Missy, who was arrogantly lecturing her subordinates just a moment ago, instantly turned into a cute, timid, and beautiful young lady. Miss True Constant Country, are you the Missy of this place? Gu Han asked even though he already knew the answer. That. Can you? Don't call me Miss True Chang Ruo Country. True Chang Ruo Country said with a mournful face. I'm already regretting my choice of this online name. It's awkward to call the person I'm calling, and it's also awkward to call the person I'm calling. Mr. Admiral, you can just call me Chang Ruo. All right, Miss Chang Ruo. Gu Han readily changed the way he addressed her. Answer my question. That's right, I'm the Missy of the Great Windmill Auction House. True Constant Country nodded. My father is the chairman of the Great Windmill Auction House, but I rarely come to this auction house. Today, I heard that the auction house has some sword-grade keepsakes, so I came over. Sword-grade keepsakes? Gu Han's mind spun. I heard you say that you received an SSS rating after reading my post. So, Chang Ruo, you've only been in the game for a few days, yet you've already reached the threshold of the sword grade? Hee, Chang Ruo, my innate sword essence is worth more than 800 quarks. After entering the game, I casually ran a few dungeons, and my innate sword essence is worth 1,000 quarks. True Constant Country lowered her head as she spoke. She had no idea that her words had caused Gu Han to laugh bitterly in his heart. It seemed that this True Times Everlasting Nation was also a rare genius. Innate sword element was worth more than 800 quarks, and it was 1 in 10,000 people like her. Chang Ruo, which sword-grade keepsake have you taken a fancy to? Gu Han asked inconspicuously. I heard that the keepsake of the number 1 sword-grade weapon, the Heavenly Sword, will be auctioned today. Could it be that you're here for the Heavenly Sword? Since you like it so much, just ask your father to give it to you. There's no need to auction it. The Heavenly Sword? True Constant Country shook her head. The keepsake of the Heavenly Sword is too time-consuming. Who knows when I'll be able to gather all of them? My goal this time is to obtain a complete set of keepsakes of the soul-devouring sword. Moreover, my ancestor was fated with the soul-devouring sword. My success rate in synchronizing with the soul-devouring sword will be higher. We've signed a commission auction agreement with our customers. If we don't go through the auction procedures, it'll be troublesome if our customers sue us for breaching the contract. Moreover, this will severely damage the reputation of our Great Windmill Auction House. Anyway, I don't think there are many people here who have as much money as us. At most, we'll just waste some money. True Constant Country was very honest. She told Guhan everything about herself, which made Guhan heave a sigh of relief. It was good that she didn't want the heavenly sword. Otherwise, he really wouldn't have the financial resources to compete with the great windmill auction house's young mistress. While Guhan and True Constant Country were talking, the auction had already begun. The buyers in the ordinary seats could only look at the display items on the round stage in the center and bid for them. As for Guhan and the others in the private rooms, they could use the holographic projection to carefully appreciate the entire collection. They didn't have to stretch their necks to look at the real items on the display stage. At the beginning of the auction, the items that were auctioned were things that Guhan didn't think much of, or things that didn't mean much to Guhan. Guhan didn't care and kept chatting with True Constant Country. It wasn't until the second half of the auction that the keepsake of the spirit sword lady, the Xian Ming sword, caught Guhan's attention. The Xian Ming sword was a very powerful existence among spirit swords. It had the ability to freeze all things. This might be a bit exaggerated, but it could indeed freeze all things. Even if it was an emperor sword lady, a flood level, or a desolate level Yuan Ku, it would still be frozen for an instant. Of course, it was only for an instant. The starting bid for the Xian Ming sword keepsake started from 500,000, and in the blink of an eye, it had risen to 3 million. Guhan even heard a familiar voice among the people who were bidding. Sure enough, Wonderbrush had also come to the auction house. Seeing him raise the price of the Xian Ming sword keepsake to a sky-high price time and time again, it was obvious that he hadn't tried to synchronize with the Xian Ming sword, a spirit sword lady. In the end, the Xian Ming sword was won by Wonderbrush at a price of 3,250,000. This was just a single keepsake, and it was unknown how long it would take for Wonderbrush to gather the whole set of keepsakes. Then, it was another boring period of time until the soul-devouring sword keepsake was brought out by the host. Distinguished guests, this is the fourth most precious item in our auction, a set of 10 keepsakes of the soul-devouring sword, the soul-summoning banner of the soul-devouring sword. There's no need for me to say anything else. The soul-devouring sword is ranked 7th in the treasure sword record. I'm sure everyone here knows its value better than I do, so I won't waste everyone's time. However, I have to point out that this is a set of 10 keepsakes. If you buy it now, you can immediately go to the sword pavilion to synchronize with the soul-devouring lady. You can imagine how much time and effort you'll save. Then, I announce that the starting bid for a set of 10 soul-devouring swords is 1,600,000 renminbi, 16 million. As soon as the host's voice fell, True Constant Country, who was beside Guhan, immediately made a bid. Moreover, he raised the price by 10 times. As expected of a nouveau riche. Guhan thought silently. Now that he thought about it, this True Constant Country only rewarded him with 588 renminbi. Wasn't that a little too stingy? Chapter 165. Perhaps it was because the True Everlasting Country's bid of 16 million was too shocking, as no one followed behind her to bid for it within a few dozen seconds. Hence, this set of rare sword-level keepsake was bought by the True Everlasting Country at the price of 16 million. I've made a profit. After receiving the set of keepsakes sent to the room by the service lady, Chang Ruo beamed with joy. She giggled foolishly as she explained to Guhan, if the price had risen step by step like normal, the people who bid would have gotten hot-blooded. This set of keepsakes would have sold for at least 18 million. Now that I've bid 16 million in one go, they've all been frightened and don't dare to compete with me anymore. These are all little tricks of the auction house. Mr. Military Governor, if you see anything that catches your eye, just tell Chang Ruo and I'll help you get it. Guhan nodded. This Chang Ruo was indeed the daughter of the auction house's owner. She was very familiar with the ways of the auction house. Thinking about it carefully, when the other items were being auctioned, the auctioneers had waited for a minute or so before finalizing the final price. However, not even 20 seconds after Chang Ruo had called out the price, the auctioneer had hammered the final price. Presumably, the auctioneer knew that his family's young miss had taken a fancy to this item, so he had secretly helped her. However, in this way, the child who had taken the item out to auction had suffered. He had earned at least 2 million. I've taken a fancy to the secret manual of the heavenly sword. Chang Ruo, can you help me take a look at it later? Since he had such an experienced auctioneer by his side, there was no reason for Guhan not to ask for help. Guhan immediately told Chang Ruo what he wanted to buy. In response, Chang Ruo patted her small, barely moving chest and promised Guhan that she would use the best price to help Guhan win the heavenly sword keepsakes. In the entire auction, the second item that caught Guhan's attention was a sword tassel. The appearance of this item immediately caused the auction house to reach a climax. Many of the private rooms that had been silent as if no one was present began to shout out their bids. The price of this piece of equipment, called the flowing cloud sword tassel, was raised to a high price of 12 million gold coins. In the end, it was bought by a mysterious player. Sword tassels were extremely rare items, be it in the game or in reality. Because the sword tassels were created by no one, all sword tassels were born naturally, just like the natural sword ladies. Once a sword maiden wore a sword tassel, it would greatly increase her strength. It was similar to equipment in traditional games. However, the difficulty of obtaining a sword mistress equipment like the sword tassel was billions of times greater than normal in-game equipment. To give a simple example, there were less than 60 sword tassels in human records. Among hundreds of thousands of sword bearers, there were less than 60 sword tassels, and at least half of them had been lost along with their owners in various battles. Sword tassels weren't like sword mistresses. After the sword bearer died, they would automatically fly back to the sword pavilion and wait for their next owner. After the owner of the sword tassel died, the sword tassel would either be lost in battle, completely lost, or taken away by Yuan Ku for his collection. In short, sword tassels were extremely rare, extremely rare. Along with the sword tassel, the sword maiden's equipment included the sword guard, the sword hilt, the sword pommel, and the sword reins. The last four pieces of equipment were the same as the sword tassel. They were all extremely rare items. Perhaps only Jendi had the ability to have his sword maiden equip these 5 pieces of equipment. First, the flowing cloud sword tassel. The so-called sword tassel was a small string of tassels tied to the hilt of the sword. The string of red tassels on the hilt of the sword in TV was the sword tassel. In the actual process of using a sword, the sword tassel didn't have any practical use. It was only there to look good. However, on the sword maiden, it had a very miraculous effect. For example, this flowing cloud sword tassel could give the sword maiden the ability to fly after wearing it. Was this ability awesome? To say that it wasn't awesome was simply too awesome. Generally speaking, the sword maidens below the spirit sword realm didn't have the ability to fly. Even among the sword maidens of the spirit sword realm, only about half of them could fly. After having the ability to fly, the sword maiden could attack Yuan Ku from the air. When dealing with Yuan Ku who didn't have the ability to fight in the air, it would be a non-destructive output. At the same time, when facing some Yuan Ku who had the ability to fly, it could erase the disadvantage between the two sides. For example, when Qingpin fought with the little demon beast, didn't the little demon beast rely on its ability to fly and desperately abuse Qingpin? If Qingpin also had a flowing cloud sword tassel on him, a little demon wouldn't even be worth mentioning. To say that it was awesome wasn't too awesome. This was because after the spirit sword, the sword maidens all had their own ability to fight in the air. The flowing cloud sword tassel was useless. All in all, for the sword bearers below the spirit sword realm, the sword tassel was indeed a very important piece of equipment. It could greatly increase the strength of the sword bearer and the sword maiden. In some appropriate situations, it had the miraculous effect of reversing the situation. Therefore, for the sake of a small sword tassel, the sword tassel was a very important piece of equipment. It could greatly increase the strength of the sword bearer and the sword maiden. In some appropriate situations, it had the miraculous effect of reversing the situation. During the bidding process, even King Yu, who had not said a word, suddenly said, "What's wrong with you? I really want a sword tassel." Even the King Yu sword in Guhan's hand couldn't help but repeat this sentence in Guhan's head. It was like a devil's voice, trying to make Guhan join the battle and seize the sword tassel that every sword maiden couldn't resist. Just like how women couldn't resist all kinds of jewelry and cosmetics, sword maidens couldn't resist the temptation of equipment. For a piece of equipment, sword maidens could even fight like ordinary girls. The men below the stage desperately raising their hands to bid for the sword tassel were mostly forced by their own sword maidens, stingy, smelly military governor. Seeing that the sword tassel was finally bought, King Yu angrily roared in Guhan's head before becoming silent again. It's finally quiet. Ji Han rubbed his head. From now on, he had to pay full attention to every single minute, because the next item to be auctioned was the secret manual of the heavenly sword that Ji Han had to get his hands on. Esteemed guests, the next item is our second most precious auction item. It came from a mysterious friend. It took his ancestor 100 years to collect this precious token. Unfortunately, this friend has encountered some problems, so he had to take out these treasures. I think everyone knows what this is. That's right, it's the keepsake of the incomparably powerful super sword lady heavenly sword that we've announced in the advertisement. It's ranked first in the treasured sword record. But what everyone doesn't know is that this time, there are a total of 8 of these tokens. The host's words instantly caused the entire auction hall to fall silent. They indeed knew that the heavenly sword token would be sold in this auction. However, aside from Guhan, none of them had specially come to this auction for the heavenly sword token. That was because the token of the heavenly sword was too difficult to collect. It was so difficult that it made one's hair stand on end. The fact that the auctioneer's ancestor had managed to collect 8 tokens in 100 years was already an inconceivable feat. His clan must have once been incomparably illustrious and powerful. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to collect 8 tokens of the heavenly sword. When the auction had begun, the guests who had come to participate in the auction were extremely puzzled and confused when they found out that the token of the heavenly sword would be the second last item to be auctioned. Why would a mere treasure sword token be auctioned after a spirit sword token? Now, they understood that there were 8 pieces of the heaven-reliant sword's keepsakes. As long as they could find 2 more pieces, then obtaining the number 1 treasured sword, the sword Maiden heaven-reliant sword, would no longer be a fantasy. Even if the buyer could not synchronize with heaven-reliant sword and successfully sell the tokens after gathering 10 of them, they would still be able to make a profit without any losses. The price of selling a set of tokens together would definitely be several times higher than if they were sold in 10 separate batches. Esteemed guests, are you ready? The auction for the 8 tokens of the heavenly sword is about to begin. The auctioneer had only spoken halfway when he was forcefully interrupted by someone. Wait. This was a distinguished guest from a top-class box. His voice was incomparably dignified, and he was definitely a person of high status. This auction must be suspended for a while. We didn't know that there were 8 tokens of the heavenly sword, so we need time to allocate our funds. This auction must be suspended for 5 minutes. Otherwise, your great windmill auction house will be kicked out of Yuzhang City. This person's tone was completely indisputable. It seemed as if he could really do the tyrannical act of driving the great windmill auction house out of Yuzhang City. Damn it. The sect leader of the Yuzhang sword sect has such a disgusting tone. Upon hearing this, the true everlasting kingdom kicked the sofa in annoyance. Isn't it just the 3rd strongest sword sect in the world? What's so great about it? Although he kept cursing, the true everlasting kingdom knew that there was no way he could refuse such a forceful request from the Yuzhang sword sect. It was impossible for them to fall out with the overlord of Yuzhang City, the Yuzhang sword sect. Moreover, the behavior of the Yuzhang sword sect was not unreasonable. After all, they had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and said that there were 8 tokens of the heavenly sword. Big Pinwheel was in the wrong for saying that it was an ominous sign. Moreover, giving them time to raise funds was also a good thing for the Great Windmill Auction House. The more funds they raised, the higher the price they could sell it for, and the more they would earn. There was no reason for them to refuse. Oh, right. Chang Ruo suddenly remembered that Guhan had mentioned that his goal was the secret manual of the heavenly sword. He must be very excited right now. She hurriedly turned her head and saw that Guhan's expression was indifferent, as if he didn't care about this news at all. Mr. Military Governor is indeed a hero among men, Chang Ruo thought in admiration. At the same time, Chang Ruo was also very confused. It was only now that she knew that there were 8 tokens of the heavenly sword. Before this, she was the same as Guhan, thinking that there was only one. Chang Ruo was the young lady of the Great Windmill Auction House, and she only knew about it at the last minute. This was a little too strange. Chapter 166. Actually, the management of Big Windmill was also dumbfounded by this sudden change. They had received news from the auctioneer that there was only one copy of the item. Who knew that the item would be delivered a little late due to some unforeseen circumstances? After it was delivered to the backstage of Big Windmill Auction House, 8 copies of the secret manual of the Heaven-Reliant Sword completely stunned the management. They wanted to delay the auction until the next auction, but the owner of the item was determined to sell it today. He didn't care even if he lost some money. Moreover, the owner had made a request that seemed unreasonable to the professionals. Helpless, Big Windmill Auction House could only brace themselves and sell it. Dear guests, according to the owner's request, these 8 Heaven-Reliant Sword keepsakes will not be sold all at once. They will be sold one by one, so there is no need to rush to raise funds. There is no need to rush. The auctioneer's forehead was covered in sweat as he said this. This was the first time he had met a customer who wanted to sell the keepsakes one by one. Why would a customer make such a stupid request? Chang Ruo frowned. If we sell it one by one, the value of the Heaven-Reliant Sword keepsakes won't be reflected at all. Only when 10 of them are put together can the value of the keepsakes be reflected. Although this might cause the auction price of the first and second copies to explode, once someone buys the first few copies, then most of the buyers will lose interest in buying. This way, the price of the first and second copies might be higher than the average price, but the price of the later copies will be a loss. It's fine. This is quite good. The corners of Guhan's mouth curled into a smile. Selling the keepsakes one by one was perfect for Guhan. Guhan already had 5 keepsakes. He could wait until the first 3, which were the fiercest of the competition, were over. When the money that the local tycoons had prepared was almost used up, he could go up and take over the last 5 copies. What a perfect plan. Soon, the first copy of the Heaven-Reliant Sword was auctioned off. Item: Heaven-Reliant Sword Secret Manual. Quantity: 1 copy. Starting price: 300,000 renminbi. Each increment must be no less than 10,000 renminbi. After 3 confirmations, if there are no further bids, the transaction will be declared a success. Now, let's start. The host banged the mallet on the auction table and announced the start of the auction. Unexpectedly, when the host announced the start of filming, he was greeted with silence. After a minute, not a single person responded. Just when the host thought that it was going to pass, someone from the private room finally spoke. 500,000. The one who spoke was the sect leader of the Yuzhang sword sect. His words truly announced the start of the auction. 600,000. 800,000. 1 million. As people continued to raise their paddles, the entire auction process directly entered the climax, and the price rose all the way to 8 million. It should be noted that the last time they had auctioned off the secret manual of the Heaven-Reliant Sword, it had only been sold for less than 3 million. Crazy. These people are crazy. True Everlasting Kingdom felt that the scene in front of her was already beyond her common sense. That's normal. Didn't you say that? The competition for the first few items should be more intense. Guhan patted True Everlasting Kingdom's head. Don't forget that most of these people's funds are here for the grand finale. Their funds are going to be used for the most crucial grand finale. However, since it's for the grand finale, shouldn't they be trying to save as much money as possible? True Everlasting Kingdom felt that she could no longer keep up with Guhan's thinking. Since they were all here for the grand finale, why would they fight so fiercely for a Sword Maiden token? However, there is only one treasure for the grand finale. There are at least a dozen factions here, so only one faction can obtain this treasure. The rest of the factions can only return empty-handed. Guhan explained with a smile. After listening to Guhan's words, Chang Ruo nodded thoughtfully. She seemed to have understood something. That's why some of the factions who aren't confident think that since the chances of obtaining the grand finale aren't high, they might as well get their hands on the strongest sword maiden. That way, they wouldn't have come to this auction in vain. Therefore, the people who are bidding above 8 million are clearly telling the surrounding factions that I don't intend to compete with you for the grand finale. Give me some face and don't compete with me for the token of the heaven-reliant sword. Look, the Yuzhang sword sect's sect master is no longer bidding. The ones bidding now are the guys from the small factions. The big factions have already given up the stage. When Chang Ruo heard this, she realized that the private rooms of the big factions had indeed stopped raising their paddles. The ones still raising their paddles were some unknown people that Chang Ruo wasn't familiar with. But these small factions are raising their paddles so fiercely. If they use up all their funds now, what will happen if they can't compete for the token later on? Chang Ruo still couldn't understand. Since they've come this far, these small factions will definitely be looking forward to the finale. After the first two failures, they won't be interested in the remaining tokens. To them, 1 or 2 tokens of the heavenly sword are completely meaningless. It will only be a waste of what little money they have to begin with. Unless someone already has a few tokens of the heavenly sword in their hand. After an intense bidding war, a faction called Radiant Sword won the bid for the first token of the heaven-reliant sword with a price of 9.8 million. The competition for the second token of the heaven-reliant sword was also very intense. However, it wasn't as good as the first token. It stopped at 8.1 million. In the end, the faction that won the second token was the same as the one that won the first token. This way, the remaining factions would at most obtain 6 tokens. For them, this was already meaningless. By the time they gathered the remaining 4 tokens, it would probably be too late. Therefore, when the third token was up for auction, the number of people competing for it plummeted. When the price reached 3.5 million, no one was willing to continue raising their paddles. Hui Jian, the boss of the small force who bought the first 2 tokens, was very happy. According to his estimation, he could buy the remaining tokens for less than 3 million. In this way, the total cost might not even be 30 million. This was much more cost-effective than buying 8 tokens together. It was not impossible for the price of 8 of them to soar to 40 million. Just as boss Hui Jian was having a beautiful dream and was about to take the third portion for 3.4 million, a person in the private room who had never spoken before suddenly spoke. 4 million. The one who spoke was a woman's voice. It came from a distinguished guest in a VIP room. She unceremoniously raised the price of the third token to 4 million. This made Boss Radiant Sword's balls ache. Although he still had some funds left, if the price of the third token soared to around 7 million, then whether or not he would be able to take down the remaining tokens would be a huge question mark. 4.5 million. Boss Radiant Sword gritted his teeth and followed the price 5 million. The number of people in the private room increased by another 500,000. This made Radiant Sword hesitate. The person in this private room should be from a large faction. Didn't we have a tacit understanding not to compete with small factions like us? 6 million. Radiant Sword gritted his teeth and directly added 1 million. Then, he told himself that if the person in the private room from the large faction still increased the price, he would immediately turn around and leave. He wouldn't play with these scammers anymore. Then, who was the person bidding against Radiant Sword? It was none other than our Miss Mingyu from back then. She was sitting in the private room with her brother Yaoguang. Back then, Mingyu didn't have any conflicts with Radiant Sword and wanted to make him unhappy. It was because Mingyu knew that Guhan had already gathered 5 tokens of the Heaven-Reliant Sword. She just wanted to help Guhan buy the tokens of the Heaven-Reliant Sword. That was all. Back then, when Mingyu heard the price of 6 million and was about to increase the price again, her communicator suddenly rang. "Hello, military governor, why are you looking for me?" When Mingyu looked at the number, it just so happened to be from that fellow military governor. Could this be the legendary telepathy? "Miss Mingyu, I just wanted to ask you, are you also interested in the Heaven-Reliant Sword?" "What?" Mingyu was dumbfounded back then. How did the military governor know that she was interested in the Heaven-Reliant Sword? But she quickly reacted. "Military governor, are you also in the big windmill?" "Yes, I'm here." I just happened to hear a familiar voice, so I wanted to ask. If Ming Yu wants the token of the heaven-reliant sword, if you want it, I'll give it up and let you have it. Of course, Guhan wouldn't give up. He had thought it through. Since Yaoguang was willing to give him a token of the heaven-reliant sword, it meant that Yaoguang and the entire Yaoguang sword faction weren't interested in the heaven-reliant sword. Back then, Ming Yu already had the skin shatter sword, so there was even less of a need for the heaven-reliant sword. She had most likely called out a bid for herself. Sure enough, back then, Ming Yu immediately expressed that she wasn't interested in the heaven-reliant sword. She just wanted to buy it and sell it to Guhan to make a profit. Guhan thanked Ming Yu, then added, 6 million is already the bottom line of that small faction. Don't raise your placard, or you'll end up smashing it in your own hand. That year, Ming Yu did not deny, she did not reply, but the long silence proved that Ming Yu had listened to Ji Yuhan. And so, Hui Jian used 6 million to buy the third token of the heaven-reliant sword. Just as Hui Jian heaved a sigh of relief and felt that things had stabilized, Guhan had already sharpened his sword and spear, preparing to kill Hui Jian midway. Guhan glanced at the balance in his account. Originally, the remaining reward from the post, plus the 6 million that the hospital had returned, left Guhan with only 9.8 million renminbi. If he wanted to buy the remaining 5 tokens with 9.8 million renminbi, it wouldn't be an easy task. Luckily, with Ming Yu's help back then, Hui Jian had already wasted 23.9 million of his own funds. It all depended on who had more money left. Chapter 167. Hui Jian couldn't be said to be a good person, because he had started his business as a loan shark. He had caused many families in the base city to be ruined and their lives miserable. But it couldn't be said that Hui Jian was a bad person, because up until now, Hui Jian's hands had not been stained with a single human life. No matter what era it was, a gang boss not having a single human life on his hands was something worthy of praise. Those who were familiar with Hui Jian knew that he had a huge weakness, and that was his younger brother, a relative who was born with a high degree of paraplegia due to a genetic defect. Because the cause of the disease came from the genes, medical technology 1,000 years later could not deal with such a terrible disease. Hui Jian could only give all the best things he could to his younger brother. For example, the token of the heavenly sword that he had bought was prepared for his younger brother. The first, second, and third tokens were sold very smoothly, basically according to Hui Jian's expectations. Although there were some problems when he bought the third token, it was still within Hui Jian's tolerance range. Following that, the fourth token was auctioned off. 2.8 million. Hui Jian called out this price in one breath. Under normal circumstances, a token of the heavenly sword could be sold for 3 million, which was already the highest price. Now that Hui Jian had directly called out this price, he was telling those who were still eager to make a move, don't even think about picking up the scraps from me. The way he saw it, the fourth heaven-reliant sword's keepsake would be in his hands once he made a bid of 2,800,000. Unfortunately, he had been too optimistic about it. 3 million. A leisurely voice followed, which made Hui Jian's heart skip a beat. Why was there still someone willing to follow? Hui Jian looked up. He had an impression of the private room that had made the bid. It was the private room that had spent 16 million in one breath to buy a complete set of soul-devouring swords. The people inside should be from a powerful force. 1 million. Hui Jian tentatively called out a new price. He wanted to know what kind of mentality the other party was using to increase the price. If the other party followed closely and increased the price by 100,000, it would mean that the other party was here to cause trouble and deliberately annoy him. If the other party increased the price by 500,000, it would mean that the other party really wanted to compete with him for the remaining heaven-reliant sword keepsake. However, Hui Jian felt that the second possibility was unlikely. If someone really wanted the token of the heavenly sword, they should have made their move when the first token was being auctioned instead of waiting until now. 320. As expected, the development that followed proved Hui Jian's guess. This guy was always increasing the price by 100,000. He was totally here to cause trouble for Hui Jian. 350. Hui Jian unceremoniously raised the price by 300,000, and the other party also followed suit, bidding a price of 3.6 million. Humph. Since you dare to come and make trouble, you should be prepared to lose a lot of money. Hui Jian snorted coldly. He had already decided to screw over this person who dared to cause trouble for him. Therefore, when the other party raised the price of 3.6 million, Hui Jian shut his mouth and no longer raised the price. The host called out 3 times in a row. After no one else raised their placards, the 4th token of the heavenly sword went to the mysterious person. From Hui Jian's point of view, he had completely screwed over the bastard who had increased the price. 3.6 million for a token of the heavenly sword that was worth at most 3 million was the kind of person he was screwing over. Some readers wanted to ask, although Hui Jian had screwed over the other party by giving up the 4th token, wouldn't he also lose one forever? In fact, Hui Jian had a good plan. After the auction was over, he would catch up to the fellow who had increased the price and buy the loan token from him for 2.5 million. For them, a token of the heavenly sword was worthless. They would definitely lose 3.6 million, so they might as well sell it to him cheaply. At least they could recover their 2.5 million loss. Hui Jian could even imagine the other party flying into a rage at his suggestion, but they had no choice but to sell it to him. Just thinking about it made him excited. Immediately after, the 5th token of the heavenly sword began to be auctioned. Hui Jian was still the first to bid, but this time, he didn't bid 2.8 million. He only bid 2 million. Those who wanted to mess with him must have been scared out of their wits by what happened to that idiot. No one dared to compete with him for the token of the heavenly sword anymore. Things seemed to go as Hui Jian had imagined. After a minute, the host repeated the bid twice. Just as he was about to finish the 5th token for the 3rd time, the person who had unjustly spent 3.8 million to buy the token raised his placard again. 2.1 million. Hui Jian's heart couldn't help but thump when he saw this. This person had already been fooled by him, so why did he still dare to bid? Could it be that he really wanted the token of the heavenly sword? No. Hui Jian comforted himself. That person had clearly hesitated for a long time before bidding. He must have exploded in anger after being fooled by Hui Jian. He was unwilling to accept it and wanted to win back some ground. Just like what Hui Jian had done just now, he wanted Hui Jian to buy a token of the heavenly sword at a high price. Let's wait and see. Hui Jian coldly snorted and then bid 2 million. In the following period of time, the price seemed to rise by the hundreds of thousands. Hui Jian bid 2.3 million, and the other person bid 2.4 million. In this cycle, when the price reached 3.7 million, Hui Jian began to hesitate. Because this time, the mysterious person who made the bid of 3.7 million was very fast. Almost a second after Hui Jian made the bid of 3 million, he immediately followed up with the price of 3.7 million. It was completely different from how the other party had been hesitant every time he made a bid. This made Hui Jian instantly vigilant. Could it be that this guy's target price was 3.7 million? If it exceeded this price, he would no longer bid. Did he want Hui Jian to habitually use 3.8 million to buy the token? It was very possible. Hui Jian's heart rang with alarm. Last time, he had cheated the other party at 3.8 million. It was very reasonable for the other party to want to cheat him back at 3.8 million. That must be it. Hui Jian, won't fall for it. Hui Jian sneered and once again gave up on bidding. At most, he would use 4 million to buy the token back later. After cutting him off twice in a row, Hui Jian decided not to buy it back at 2.5 million, which was a reasonable price. At most, he would give the other party 2 million. As a result, the 4th and 5th Heaven-reliant sword secret manuals were bought by Guhan at 3.8 million and 3.7 million respectively. However, in this way, Guhan only had 2.3 million left in his wallet. There were still 3 more tokens left, and it seemed like Guhan wouldn't be able to buy even one. The 6th Heaven-reliant sword keepsake finally began to be auctioned off. When Hui Jian heard Ji Yu Han calling out a price to him once again, he completely understood that he was an idiot. This was because the other party had directly called out a price of 4 million when the sixth token appeared. This mysterious person didn't seem to want to play mind games with him anymore. He didn't want to disgust him at all, but he wanted to compete with him for the token of heaven-reliant sword. This discovery almost made Hui Jian choke on his breath. Hui Jian swore that if he didn't get his revenge, he wouldn't be human. Fine, you also want the token of heaven-reliant sword, right? If the next token doesn't exceed 8 million, don't even think about taking it away so easily. Hui Jian was full of negative emotions. Driven by these emotions, Hui Jian had already lost his rationality. He strongly wanted revenge, so he followed closely behind Guhan and called out a price of 5 million. 6 million. Guhan followed calmly, as if he didn't care about money at all. 7 million. The veins on Hui Jian's forehead popped. 10 million. Hui Jian could clearly hear Guhan's disdainful snort from the other end of the microphone. This snort seemed to be the most vicious mockery in the world. He was mocking Hui Jian for daring to think he was smart and play mind games with him. He was mocking Hui Jian for daring to compete with him in terms of money. This snort made Hui Jian completely explode. 15 million. Hui Jian crazily shouted this number. He jumped out of his private room. In front of everyone, he raised his head, pointed at Guhan's private room, and shouted like a madman, "Come on, follow. Follow again if you have the guts." Guhan, who was in that private room, seemed to be frightened by Hui Jian's imposing manner. After a while, he didn't say a word. Not only did no one in that private room speak, even the rest of the onlookers were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Everyone in the auction house was shocked by this scene. They had never seen such an explosive scene and story, as well as such a twist of intrigue in their lives. Even the auctioneer in charge of the auction couldn't say a word. He even forgot to drop the hammer every 20 seconds. Finally, after 2 minutes, he heard Guhan's voice again. "Host, drop the hammer. This token of the heavenly sword belongs to the gentleman who bid 15 million. Oh. Only then did the host hurriedly drop the hammer. "Congratulations, sir. 15 million, sold. The sixth token of the heavenly sword belongs to you, sir." Clang. Hui Jian's legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. Only then did he realize that he had actually spent 15 million to buy a token of the heavenly sword. He had been tricked by the other party again. At this moment, Hui Jian felt that the whole world had abandoned him. This was a sad story. Chapter 168. Guhan, who had ruthlessly tricked Hui Jian, had shocked everyone present. For the last 2 tokens, Guhan had called out a price of 1 million, but no one dared to go against Guhan, even Hui Jian didn't dare, because the 15 million was all he had. The money he had left wasn't even 600,000, so what was there to bid for? Thus, Guhan used the last 3 million to inconceivably buy the remaining 2 tokens. This way, Guhan had collected 9 tokens for the heavenly sword and was only 1 step away from the heavenly sword. "I'll return the 10 million to you." After putting away the last 2 tokens for the heavenly sword, Guhan's personal terminal tapped Chang Ruo Kingdom's wrist and returned the 10 million to her. In an auction, one couldn't just randomly announce a price. You had to have a lot of money in your personal terminal to be able to announce a price within the specified amount. Thus, Guhan borrowed 10 million from Chang Ruo Kingdom at the last minute. After the auction ended, he returned all of it to Chang Ruo. In total, the money stayed in Guhan's account for less than 10 minutes. "Mr. Military Governor, you're still missing 1 token, right?" Chang Ruo took back the loan and stared at Guhan curiously. Chang Ruo is very curious. How does Mr. Military Governor plan to obtain the remaining token? Don't be anxious. Guhan smiled. The remaining token will find its way to you on its own. Isn't the main event coming up next for your great windmill auction house? I really don't know where you guys got your hands on the sect opening decree. You guys are really something. That's right, The finale item of the Great Windmill Auction House this time was a decree on the establishment of a sect that was only produced 3 times a year. It was also the super reward that Ming Yu and Ji Yu Han received from the Zhenyuan Garrison Crusade mission. Back then, Ming Yu had earned a lot from that mission. In order not to let you say that the author has a low word count, the author will not describe in detail the final auction, which will be so intense that the air is about to explode. To put it simply, the opening decree was priced at 630 million before it was finally bought by a force that even Guhan did not know about. Guhan could still vividly remember that the boss of that organization had shouted out 630 million through gritted teeth. He reckoned that the boss must have thrown in all his money. After bidding farewell to Ming Yu and Yao Guang, Guhan was about to leave the Great Windmill Auction House. Originally, Ming Yu had invited Guhan to leave with her. Yao Guang had also said that he had some matters regarding the instance dungeon that he wanted to discuss with Guhan. However, Guhan had flatly refused. It was not that he did not want to be with Ming Yu and the others, but he was afraid that if Yao Guang's identity was exposed, the heavenly sword token that was delivered to him would be lost. In the end, Ming Yu did not follow them back then, and the true everlasting nation followed behind Ji Yu Han. In her words, she wanted to see how the remaining keepsake of the heavenly sword would be delivered to her doorstep. It did not take long before she saw it. When Ji Yu Han left the auction house and walked a few dozen meters into a small alley, a group of people surrounded him from the front and back, blocking Ji Yu Han's way back. These people blocking Ji Yu Han's way were naturally not strangers. They were Hui Jian and his group of brothers who had been ruthlessly tricked by Ji Yu Han. Is this interesting? Guhan looked at the dozens of people blocking his way and smiled at Hui Jian. It's not like you can attack me. Why did you send so many people to surround me? Sword Maiden Online did not have a PK mode. Thus, Hui Jian's brothers only looked impressive, but they were actually useless. I want to talk to you. Hui Jian looked as if his mother had died. Sell me the keepsake of your heavenly sword. You only have 4 of them, so they're useless in your hands. Why don't you sell them to me? I'll pay 5 million each. Hui Jian's heart was bleeding when he said that. They both had 4 of them, but he had spent nearly 40 million to buy them. As for Guhan, he had only spent 10 million. No matter how he looked at it, Hui Jian's heart was bleeding profusely. I refuse. Guhan smiled happily. However, seeing how troubled you are, why don't we change the way we trade? What way? Hui Jian asked subconsciously. I'll buy the fragments of the heavenly sword in your hands. How about that? Guhan's words made Hui Jian's heart light up. Selling his heavenly sword token to this kid and recouping the 40 million he had lost was not a bad choice. All right, I'll sell it to you for the same amount of money. I won't charge you a single cent more. Hearing Hui Jian's words, the true everlasting country almost burst out laughing. This guy actually thought that someone would be a fool and use 40 million to buy the token of the heavenly sword in his hands. Logically speaking, Ji Yu Han only had less than 1 million left, so where would he find another 40 million? No, no, no. Guhan waved his hand. Sir, you're all smart people. You don't think that someone would be stupid enough to use 40 million to buy your token, do you? Hearing this, Hui Jian's face turned red again, and he immediately became embarrassed. If this was the real world, Hui Jian would definitely beat this annoying guy up and let him know how powerful he, Hui Jian, was. Don't forget, you only have 4 of them. Without them, they're no different from scrap metal. Looking at you, you must be a newbie who has just become a treasured sword wielder. This is the token of the number 1 sword wielder in the treasured sword level. If you miss this opportunity, you won't get another one, Hui Jian patiently persuaded. In order to recoup his losses, Hui Jian had no choice but to throw away his pride. All right, sir, neither you nor I are idiots. Don't use these words to coax a 3-year-old to trick me. You're right, I do need these 4 heavenly sword tokens, but I don't have a single cent on me right now. Don't expect me to fork out 40 million to buy them for you, Guhan said coldly. P2. Hui Jian spat. What do you want? It's simple. You and I will fight. Ji Yu Han patted the poor sword in his hand. Let's use the 4 tokens of our heaven-reliant swords as stakes. Let's go to the arena and fight. Whoever wins will get all 8 tokens. Do you dare to take up the challenge? Fight! Hui Jian hesitated for a moment. Hui Jian was a famous sword wielder in the game, and he was also a famous expert on the virtual list of famous swords. Usually, Hui Jian was the one who found others to spar with. However, when faced with Guhan, a contestant who took the initiative to challenge him, Hui Jian inexplicably felt a little guilty. What, are you afraid? Guhan smiled and showed his name, the 2 large words military governor and the glittering title of King Yu's Go Gen Dungeons No. 1. Today is my 10th day in the game. Do you think it's possible for me to become a famed sword wielder in 10 days? What's more, I don't even have my own sword maiden, so I can only use this ancient sword maiden. Seeing military governor's name, Hui Jian came to a realization. No wonder this scar-faced person looked familiar. He was the internet celebrity military governor. It was no wonder that he lost to a genius strategy master like him. It was no wonder that he wanted the heaven-reliant sword's keepsake. For a genius like him, only the heaven-reliant sword was worthy of him. Hui Jian first found a way out of the situation. Immediately, the gloominess in his heart dissipated. Then, he realized that the truth was as Guhan had said. As a famed sword wielder, there was no reason for him to be afraid of an ancient sword wielder's challenge. Even if he was a genius, the gap between 2 levels was not something that could be overcome by the word genius. If he did not even dare to accept an ancient sword wielder's challenge, then he would have no face to continue living in this game. It seemed that this military governor had become an internet celebrity recently, and he had become arrogant. He actually thought that he could defeat a famed sword wielder as an ancient sword wielder. If he lost his head, then don't blame me for bullying the weak. Alright, I agree. Let's see who's the real deal in the arena. I also want to see what kind of ability the renowned Sir Admiral has under his hand. Please. Please. The Yuzhong Arena was the only place in Yuzhong City where swordsmen could fight freely. It was a place for friends who wanted to learn from each other, or for swordsmen who wanted to settle their grudges. It was a fair place to fight. In the arena, there were a total of 18 arenas. Each arena could withstand a battle between immortal sword tier and below. When Guhan arrived, one of the arenas was empty. Guhan and Hui Jian each paid 20 renminbi to use the arena, and 50 renminbi to sign a contract. The contract fee was the best way to resolve a conflict between 2 swordsmen. For example, Ji Yuhan and Hui Jian had handed over their respective tokens of heaven-reliant sword to the system. Then, with the system's notarization, they signed a contract, stipulating that the victor would be able to obtain all of the tokens of heaven-reliant sword. Because the tokens were in the hands of the system, there was no need to worry about reneging on the contract. If the 2 sides didn't bet anything, but instead agreed that the loser should call the winner daddy, then the contract could also be signed. If the loser refused to honor the contract, then the system would control the loser's body and force him to kneel before the winner, forcing him to call the winner daddy. There would also be a high-definition recording, which would be played in a loop throughout the arena. Basically, no one dared to violate the contract with the system, because the punishment for violating the contract was too cruel. In short, Guhan and Hui Jian signed their names on the contract, and then they each jumped into the arena. They both thought that victory was in their hands. Chapter 169. I am an ancient sword-level sword wielder, military governor. The sword wielder is an ancient sword-level sword wielder, Qingpin sword. After the battle with Monarch, our grudges will be settled. With our lives, we will bring glory to the human race, we will not disappoint the future generations. Ji Yuhan very formally recited these words. This was the absolute standard of etiquette. First, he stated his identity and the sword wielder, and then said that after this battle, all gratitude and grudges will be settled. After that, he will fight for the future of mankind, and not disappoint future generations. I am a famous sword-level sword wielder, Hui Jian. The sword wielder is an ancient sword-level sword wielder, treasure sword-level sword wielder Lingyu sword, famous sword-level sword wielder Versailles. After the battle with you, all gratitude and grudges will be settled. Our lives will shine for the prosperity of mankind, and we will not disappoint future generations. Hui Jian also said the same thing. Just by listening to these two people's opening remarks, the audience felt that Hui Jian would definitely win. 3 sword ladies against 1 sword lady, no matter how they thought about it, there was no reason for them to lose. System notification. Both sides, military governor, Hui Jian, please prepare for battle. The battle will begin in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin. As soon as the electronic voice fell, Hui Jian took out a slender and curved small tachi, Yujin sword. The tachi originated from the Tang dynasty of Huaxia in the Middle Ages. It was the famous Tang Dao, also known as the Heng Dao. Later, the Heng Dao was introduced to Fusang and was respected by the nobles of Fusang. It became a weapon that only the gods could use. Gradually, it evolved into the tachi of Fusang, or simply called the Fusang Dao. Reading this, the readers might be confused. Since it was called Tang Dao, Heng Dao, tachi, then it should be a Dao. How could it be called a sword? Wasn't this too unscientific? That was because in the traditional cultural system of Fusang, it was not like Huaxia, where the Dao and the sword were clearly separated. Even in the Middle Ages in Fusang, the terms Dao and sword did not exist. All the famous weapons only had names, without suffixes. For example, Oda Nobunaga's Masamune, Tokugawa Ieyasu's Muramasa, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's Murasame, Okita Soji's Kikuikamunji, Sasaki Kojiro's Bizen longboat. These were all katanas, but which one of them had the word Dao behind it? Therefore, when Fusang's famous weapons were active, there was no distinction between sabers and swords. It was precisely because of such an opportunity that after the apocalypse, the famous katanas of Fusang all awakened and became sword mothers. As a result, the katana, which was a series of weapons with the name of saber, was miraculously classified as a sword, and was nicknamed the reversed katana by later generations. Use the night as a sacrifice to your fangs. Appear, Princess Yejin of the Night. Guhan's recent friends were all relatively normal people. They couldn't say those shameful, Chunibya words. Who would have thought that Hui Jian, the big boss of the underworld, would be so fluent in the speech of a Chunibya? After Yejin Ken was liberated, he became a girl wearing a modified Fuzo samurai suit sewn with black chiffon. All Fuzo's sword mothers had inherited Fuzo's libertine and open style of dressing. In general, they dressed as sexily as possible, revealing as much flesh as possible. Large areas of her snow-white skin and beautiful flesh were exposed, and her straight legs were wrapped in thin black stockings. She looked like a seductive black rose. Mr. Military Governor, you are an ancient sword wielder. I, Hui Jian, will not bully you. Let Yejin send you on your way. Hui Jian's words were loud and clear. It sounded as if he really wasn't bullying Guhan, but in reality, Hui Jian's sword attributes were in the tens of thousands. Even though they were both ancient sword wielder sword mothers, Yejin's attributes were more than 10 times higher than Guhan's. Come, let's do it. Ji Yuhan drew out the impoverished sword, brandished it, and laughed. Why don't you liberate your sword mother? Do you look down on me that much? Hui Jian saw that Guhan didn't liberate Qingpin, and thought that he was looking down on him. I am a sword master. Guhan pointed his sword at Hui Jian's head. I am the strongest. Hui Jian snorted. Yejin's legs kicked the ground, and he leaped into the air. Under the hot sunlight, Yejin's figure disappeared without a trace. Most of Fusang's sword maidens were murderous sword maidens, and Yejin was no exception. To murderous sword maidens, invisibility was their talent. They were used to hiding in the dark and launching fatal attacks at their enemies' vitals. For example, Yejin. Yejin's passive skill was as follows: light scatters the night. When Yejin appears under the sunlight, he will be dispelled by the sunlight, and gain invisibility for 12 seconds. After attacking, he will be forced out of invisibility. After exiting invisibility, there will be a cooldown of 5 seconds before he can enter invisibility again. After entering invisibility, Yejin moved quickly, and soon, she was behind Guhan. From Yejin's point of view, Guhan's back was completely defenseless, and she could slash as many times as she wanted. However, Yejin was more interested in Guhan's neck. Yejin's sword quietly approached Guhan's neck. In the next second, her sword would cut Guhan's neck like lightning, and cause a fatal injury to Guhan. "I see you." Just as Yejin was about to make her move, she suddenly heard her prey say such a sentence. It was as if his prey wasn't his prey, but the hunter who hunted him. "Barker." Yejin slashed with all her might, but the scene of the shield surging around her didn't happen. Yejin's slash hit empty air. The solid frost in front of her had disappeared without her knowing. "Where is he?" "Here." The hair on Yejin's back stood up, and she instinctively retreated, but as soon as she took a step back, she felt as if she had bumped into a solid chest. Yejin threw himself into Ji Yuhan's arms. Yejin sent himself into Ji Yuhan's arms so easily. An assassin in an embrace was the most dangerous and vulnerable assassin, and for Guhan, it was the latter. Qing Pin's sword turned into a dazzling light, and it seemed as if countless swords were slashing at Yejin's body. What was more terrifying was that Guhan's sword almost hit Yejin's vitals, and every hit was a dazzling red damage. Yejin's shield was shaken by Qing Pin's slashes, and in an instant, it was reduced by more than 50%. Yejin wanted to break free from Guhan's embrace, so she no longer defended against Guhan's attacks. Instead, she raised her sword and stabbed at Guhan's neck. Yejin's plan was to exchange blood for blood. Her shield's energy was much more than Guhan's, so no matter how much blood she exchanged, Yejin would not be at a disadvantage. Yejin's plan was correct, but unfortunately, she did not have the chance to do so. After a storm of attacks, Yejin was thrown into the sky by Guhan. Then, Guhan also jumped high, and he jumped even higher than Yejin. "What's going on?" Before Yejin could react, she saw Guhan flashing in front of her like a monstrous eagle. At this time, Yejin was still in the sky. "Sorry." When Guhan said these 3 words, he, who had jumped higher than Yejin, suddenly lost the ability to rise, and his body began to fall rapidly. Below Guhan, Yejin was still in a state of ascension. "Oh no." Yejin's pupils contracted. She had already understood Guhan's plan. Guhan wanted to use the gravitational force to give her a fatal blow. In a panic, Yejin wanted to escape from Guhan's shadow, but she was in the sky, and there was no place for her to borrow strength. She could only watch as Guhan crashed into her, and the two of them fell heavily to the ground, creating a cloud of dust. "Yejin! Yejin!" Hui Jian, who was watching from the side, hurriedly called for his sword lady through the sword mark, but the battlefield was completely covered in dust, and Hui Jian could not see the situation at all. "Hui Jian! Change to Fan Jexis's sister." "Hui Jian! Hurry up and change to Fan Jexis's sister." Finally, Yejin's voice reached Hui Jian's ears, and he immediately asked Hui Jian to use his famed sword lady to fight. But Hui Jian hesitated. It was too embarrassing to use a famed sword lady to defeat an ancient sword wielder. Moreover, he had used the sword lady's interface. He looked at Yejin's shield, which clearly had 30% of its energy left. Yejin should still be able to fight. Change to her. That sword master's target is actually you, Hui Jian. Hui Jian was dumbfounded by Yejin's words. He then realized that the best way for Guhan to win the battle was not to defeat all of his sword ladies, but to defeat his own. There were 2 ways to win a battle. The first was to defeat all of the opponent's sword ladies, break their personal shields, and reduce their durability to 5%. This kind of victory was known as the King's Way victory, which meant that the opponent's strength was completely above the opponent's, and it was a King's Way victory by defeating all of the opponent's sword ladies. The second way was to get rid of the opponent's sword ladies, and directly attack the sword wielder, breaking the sword wielder's personal shields, and aiming the sword tip at the opponent's fatal spot. This was also the way to win. This kind of victory was known as the King's Way victory, which was obtained through a sneak attack when one's strength was inferior to the opponent's. Both of these ways of winning were ways to win in the arena. Hui Jian finally realized that the military governor's battle with Yejin seemed to be very intense, but his real target was not Yejin, but himself. As long as he defeated Hui Jian, he would not have to face the even stronger treasured swords and famed sword ladies later on. Yejin, return to the sword. Hui Jian, who had understood everything, began to recall Yejin. The sword in the dust had already turned into a stream of light and returned to Hui Jian's hand, which he then sheathed back into his scabbard. Luckily, there's still time. The ancient barbarian giant, the god of power Fanzisi, responds to Master's call. Hui Jian pulled out a large sword from his back, preparing to replace the famed sword Lady Fanzisi in the battle. He did not forget to say his Chinibya speech, but a silver-white sword was already pressed against Hui Jian's throat. You lost. Guhan's scarred face appeared in front of Hui Jian. I didn't lose. Hui Jian shouted excitedly, I still have my personal shields, you didn't break through my personal shields, so you can't hurt my vitals. System notification. Player Hui Jian has been hit in his vitals. Player Hui Jian has been judged dead. Player military governor has won. Why? Why? I still have my personal shields. The system notification undoubtedly confirmed Hui Jian's defeat. He could not understand why he was judged to have lost when he still had his personal shields. You were trying to replace your famed sword lady just now, right? Guhan, who had won, put away his Qing pin sword, and calmly explained, did you forget that the personal shields will disappear in the gap between replacing the sword lady? Actually, I was delayed on the way here, and I was a second late. If you hadn't said your Chinibya speech, perhaps I wouldn't have been able to catch up during the gap between your personal shields. What a pity. Therefore, it was better not to be too Chinibya. Chapter 170. I lost. Hui Jian forced himself to not fall to the ground, because his lackeys were all around him. If they saw him in such a dejected state, then he, as the boss, would not be able to continue living. While Hui Jian was crying silently in pain, Ji Yuhan found the administrator of the martial arts arena and received the 8 keepsakes of the heaven-reliant sword from him. In addition to the 5 keepsakes Ji Yuhan already had, Ji Yuhan now had a total of 13 keepsakes of the heaven-reliant sword in his hands. Mr. Military Governor, let's hurry to the sword tower. Chang Ruo hasn't seen what Lady Heavenly Sword looks like yet. When true Chang Ruo saw that Guhan had obtained the tokens of heaven-reliant sword, he was even more excited than Guhan. This was heaven-reliant sword, which was ranked number 1 among the treasured swords. It had been over 100 years since anyone had received the favor of this sword lady in the game. Wait, there's no hurry. I still have something to do. Guhan patted Chang Ruo's head and walked back to the arena. There, Hui Jian was still motionless, as if he had lost all love for this world. Move aside. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to insult our boss? When they saw Guhan approach Hui Jian's subordinates all surrounded him aggressively and began to denounce Guhan's vile behavior of adding insult to injury. All of you, shut up. Let him come over. Do you think he'll eat me? Hui Jian shouted and got his subordinates to move away. He then took the initiative to walk to Guhan's side and looked at Guhan unhappily. Hey, why are you looking for me? Are you here to mock me? I won't. Guhan shook his head seriously. I never mock others because I don't deserve to mock those who are stronger than me. I disdain mocking those who are weaker than me. Guhan's words almost made Hui Jian spit out a mouthful of blood again. This sentence was the strongest mockery in history. Why are you looking for me? If it's just to say what you just said, you can scram now. Hui Jian swallowed the blood in his throat with great difficulty and said in a bad mood. I just want to tell you that I was wrong this time. It's my fault. Guhan sighed. If I didn't use some tricks, I wouldn't have been able to obtain the tokens of the heaven-reliant sword. I hope you can understand. You apologize to me. Hui Jian was stunned for a moment. You, a person with the halo of a protagonist, actually apologized to a dead supporting character like me? This didn't fit the pattern. Didn't they say that the protagonist should always be right? Are they punishing the evil and promoting the good? Are they punishing scum like me? Besides, you won fair and square. You don't have to apologize to me. What the hell are you talking about? Guhan was also stunned for a moment. Could it be that this person was so angry that he became stupid? These 8 heaven-reliant sword keepsakes aren't worth 40 million, but now that you've spent 40 million, you don't even have a single keepsake. That's why I feel very sorry for you. I want to apologize to you. P2E. Hui Jian's eyes became wet for a moment. He then spat at Guhan's feet. That's right, he purposely spat at Guhan's feet so that it wouldn't touch Guhan's body. Grandpa doesn't want your fake apology. If you really feel sorry for Grandpa, then return your 8 tokens of the heaven-reliant sword to me. Otherwise, scram as far as you can. I can't return these 8 tokens to you. Guhan's face was calm. But I owe you a favor. In the future, I can help you with a favor that is within 40 million. This is my promise. If you have any trouble, I can help you settle it once. After saying this, Guhan swaggered off without looking back, leaving Hui Jian and the others dumbfounded. Boss, are we really just going to let it go like this? A few of his subordinates gathered around Hui Jian. One of them with shifty eyes suggested, Boss, do you want me to go to the real world and look for this person's identity? With these few scars on his face, it should be very easy to find him. When the time comes, we'll get back at him in the real world. No need. Hui Jian waved his hand. This round, I, Hui Jian, have completely lost. How would I have the face to find trouble with him in the real world? Moreover, who knows if he also has scars on his face in the real world? Maybe he's a handsome man in the real world. Or maybe he's a sword wielder. He's a guy who was born with the aura of a protagonist. Any villain who goes to find trouble with him will have a good ending. I'll admit this loss. Didn't he boast that he owes us a favor? When the time comes, he'll return the favor. Mr. Military Governor, why do you want to take the initiative to owe that guy a favor? On the way out, Chang Ruo Guo asked in confusion. You don't have to care about owing favors. My dad said that in this world, money is easy to return, things are also easy to return, but favors are the hardest to return. It's best not to owe anyone favors for the rest of your life. Who knows what will happen in the future? Guhan said meaningfully. There was once a great hero who said, if you want to do great things, you have to make fewer enemies and more friends. After all, that person just now lost 40 million because of me. This debt is too big. If I don't appease him, he'll definitely be my enemy in the future. When I'm at my peak, maybe I don't need to care about him. But when I'm like a tiger in the plains, one word from him might be able to determine my life and death. There's no need for me to become his enemy. If possible, I hope that we can be friends. After listening to Guhan's words, Chang Ruo's face was immediately filled with admiration, and her heart was filled with joy. Mr. Military Governor is indeed a great hero. You cheated someone of 40 million, but you still want to be friends with him. This is indeed a realm that I, Chang Ruo, will have to look up to for the rest of my life. The real Chang Ruo Guo followed Guhan with admiration in her heart. Guhan didn't care that he had a tail, and the two of them arrived at the entrance of the sword tower in Yuzhang City. The sword tower in the game was many times larger than the sword tower in reality. This was because the sword tower in reality was divided into 8 parts, each of which had a portion of the sword ladies. However, the sword tower in Yuzhang City in the game had all the sword ladies that humans had ever owned. After all, this was just the game's data. After entering the sword tower, they discovered that the sword tower in the game was very different from the sword tower in reality. The sword tower in reality was similar to a museum, and all the sword ladies were placed in cabinets. On the other hand, the sword tower in the game was like a large hotel. After entering the main hall, it was like entering the lobby of a hotel. There were dozens of receptionists lined up in a row to receive inquiries from the players. Guhan found an empty counter and walked up. Hello, sir. May I know what service you require? The NPC attendant at the counter asked with a smile. I'm looking for a sword lady to synchronize with me, Guhan replied. Just to confirm, do you want to synchronize with the natural sword lady? If you only want to synchronize with the artificial sword lady, you can head to Toad Street and buy an artificial sword lady there to synchronize with you. If you want to synchronize with the natural sword lady, please show me the token you have collected, the attendant said in a formal manner. Here. Guhan took out 10 heavenly sword tokens and placed them in front of the counter. The attendant took the tokens, and a glint flashed in her eyes. After scanning the tokens, she smiled and said, "Congratulations. Congratulations. You have successfully gathered the 10 secret manuals required by the innate sword maiden for the heavenly sword. You can now synchronize your experiments with the heavenly sword. Please note that after the synchronization is successful, the 10 tokens will disappear. If the synchronization fails, you will lose one of the tokens, and you will never be able to synchronize with the heavenly sword again. Are you sure you want to synchronize with the heavenly sword?" "I'm sure." "Understood. Please keep your tokens well." The attendant returned the tokens to Guhan. The heavenly sword is staying in room 3866 on the 3rd floor of the sword tower. You can take the number 9 elevator to the 3rd floor. Once you find room 3866, use the token to enter the room. The heavenly sword is sleeping in the room. The sword tower in the game was really like a hotel. The sword lady maintained her human form and stayed in the hotel room. From a certain point of view, did this count as checking into a hotel room? Of course, Guhan didn't care about these miscellaneous things. He walked straight to the number 9 elevator. Chang Ruo followed closely behind Guhan, but she was stopped by 2 attendants at the elevator door. "Greetings, player. You are not qualified to enter the sword tower. Please show your token at the service desk before entering the sword tower." I don't have a token." Chang Ruo had just said this when she suddenly realized that she did have a token on her. Didn't she just bid for a whole set of soul-devouring sword tokens? Chang Ruo immediately rushed back to the service desk and completed the procedures as fast as she could. When she returned to the elevator, she sadly discovered that Guhan was nowhere to be seen. Chang Ruo wanted to send a message to Guhan to ask him to wait for her, but when she opened her personal terminal, she sadly discovered that she had been with Guhan for half a day. She had actually forgotten to add Guhan as a friend. Speaking of which, Guhan had taken the initiative to add Chang Ruo, but Chang Ruo had coolly rejected him by blocking all strangers. At this time, Guhan didn't care about Chang Ruo. He had already taken the elevator to the 3rd floor. After exiting the elevator, he saw room 3850. On the left was room 3849, and on the right was room 3851. Guhan walked in the direction of room 3851. After walking for a minute, he arrived at room 3866. This room's door was locked, and the peephole on the door flashed with a red light. Guhan knew that this meant that the sword lady was locked and asleep. Guhan took out his token and scanned it on the scanner on the door. The red light instantly turned green, and with a click, the door of room 3866 opened. Walking into the room, he found that the room was actually a bit monotonous. There wasn't even a bathroom, a TV, or an air conditioner. There was only a bed in the middle of the room, and a beautiful girl in blue. No, it would be more appropriate to call her a domineering lady. A beautiful domineering lady in blue quietly lay on the bed with her hands clasped together. She looked just like the sleeping beauty princess from the Middle Ages. Chapter 171. Although Yi Tian was lying quietly on the bed, Guhan wasn't allowed to touch her because there was a barrier protecting her. The barrier would only disappear when Yi Tian slowly woke up. Logically speaking, Yi Tian should have woken up within 3 minutes of the door being opened. However, Guhan waited in the room for close to 20 minutes and Yi Tian didn't seem to have any intention of waking up. Was there a problem? Guhan was a little anxious. The sword lady sleeping on the bed was actually a fragment of Heavenly Sword's consciousness. It was mentioned in the previous chapter that the natural sword ladies in the game were actually a small piece of the sword lady's consciousness that was torn off and transformed into an illusion. It was precisely because these fragments of consciousness came from the sword lady's main body. Therefore, after obtaining the recognition of the fragments of consciousness and successfully synchronizing with the main body, the success rate of synchronizing with the main body in reality would be many times higher. Without a master, these fragments couldn't stay awake for a long time. Otherwise, they would gradually dissipate. Therefore, They could only maintain a deep sleep in the form of a sword lady and wait for their sword wielder to arrive. Previously, King Yu's Go Gen Gen's consciousness fragment should have been lying in one of the rooms in the sword pavilion, waiting for the sword wielder to wake up. In the end, Guhan used another method to snatch it, and the system forcefully stuffed it into Guhan's sword. It was quite pitiful. Right, ever since King Yu entered the sword pavilion, King Yu hadn't spoken to him at all. "King Yu, are you there?" Guhan called through the sword mark. "What? Don't you have a new sword lady? Why are you still looking for me, yesterday's daylily?" King Yu's reply was filled with jealousy. "There's a problem. Can you come and take a look for me?" Ji Han felt that there was probably no one who understood better than the sword lady what was wrong with Yi Tian. "No." King Yu rejected decisively. "Why would I come and ruin your good time when you're so lovey-dovey with other sword ladies?" Hearing King Yu's reply, Guhan was stunned and asked dumbfoundedly, "King Yu, are you jealous?" "Who's jealous?" "You're the jealous one." "No, I'm not jealous." Guhan's words caused King Yu to explode. All sorts of strange and incoherent replies came out. It seemed like she was really jealous. "If you're not jealous, then come out." Guhan pulled out the King Yu sword. "Come out. If you're not jealous, then come out. You despicable person, I'm coming out now. Just you wait." Thus, King Yu was foolishly tricked out by Ji Han just like that, proving that he wasn't jealous. Other than being at Sunder, it seemed like King Yu's comical nature was also quite high. The King of Yu and Ji Han continued to argue for a while, but in the end, he couldn't resist Ji Han's flowery words and was tricked to the front of Heavenly Sword's bed. With just a glance, the corners of his mouth immediately curled up. "Oh, isn't this Heavenly Heroine? I was wondering which sword lady a despicable person like you got, but it turns out you're having an affair with this heroine. Alright, let me ask you, have you heard of this phrase?" "What phrase?" "You'll never wake up a person pretending to be asleep, especially a woman pretending to be asleep." It was rare for King Yu to say such a famous phrase. "You're saying that Yi Tian is pretending to be asleep? How is that possible? She's not even breathing." Guhan carefully looked at Yi Tian's face, but there was no movement at all. Furthermore, she didn't breathe. Even a sleeping person breathed. Unless it was a fragment of a sword lady's consciousness that was in a deep sleep, she wouldn't need to breathe. "I don't know about other sword ladies, but I know about Heavenly Heroine very well. Despicable person, do you have wine in your dimensional pocket? White wine, yellow wine, red wine, rice wine, anything is fine." Logically speaking, Guhan was someone who had never drunk alcohol. How could he possibly have wine on him? However, Guhan recalled that he did have a substitute for wine. No, it should be the high-purity pulp of wine, medical alcohol. Alcohol was quite useful in many instance dungeons. Thus, Guhan had deliberately brought a bottle of medical alcohol with him in case of emergencies. "Is this okay?" Guhan pulled out the bottle of medical alcohol and handed it to King Yu. Seeing that, King Yu's eyes lit up and he smiled. Yes, there is nothing more suitable than this. This time, our Heavenly Heroine is going to feel good." King Yu excitedly picked up the bottle of medical alcohol and opened it. He didn't do anything else. He just squatted down beside Yi Tian's bed and blew a breath into her nose, sending the aroma of the medical alcohol into her nostrils. Aya, I can't keep pretending anymore. To think that there would be someone here who understands this heroine so well. I can't take it anymore." Heavenly Sword, who had not been breathing earlier, leapt up from the bed like a carp leaping over the dragon gate. This action that even Guhan found unimaginable allowed her to snatch the bottle of medical alcohol from King Yu's hands. "Good wine." Yi Tian took a deep breath, closed her eyes and opened her mouth. The entire bottle of medical alcohol was then poured into her mouth. Heavens, this was an entire bottle of medical alcohol with a purity of 95%. If an ordinary person were to drink a mouthful of medical alcohol, their esophagus would feel as though it was being burned. If they were to drink a few mouthfuls of medical alcohol, their entire stomach would be burned to the point of developing gastric ulcers or perforation, leading to massive internal bleeding. If they were not rescued in time, they would basically die. However, Yi Tian actually drank the entire bottle of medical alcohol. After drinking it, she let out a satisfied burp and complained in a somewhat displeased manner. Burp. It's still not as tasty as my Jukang wine. Yi Tian's burp caused the entire room to be filled with the smell of alcohol. This showed just how high the concentration of alcohol was. However, Yi Tian actually complained that it wasn't as tasty as Jukang wine. Just who was this Jukang wine? Forget it, I haven't drunk alcohol for over 100 years. I've finally satisfied my craving. Heavenly Sword stretched and walked to King Yu's side. She was full of smiles as she asked, "Sword friend, do you know me?" From Yi Tian's point of view, since this sword lady knew how to use alcohol to trick her out of her fake sleep state, she probably knew her background very well and knew her. "You don't know me?" King Yu was curious. His expression became somewhat unsightly. "Yi Tian, you actually don't know this king? How could you not know me? How preposterous. Is it strange that I don't know you?" Yi Tian yawned. "Even if we had an ill-fated relationship in the past, I'm just a fragment of consciousness right now. I'm sorry, the main body didn't leave me any memories of you. I'm sorry." King Yu was immediately at a loss for words. Yi Tian was right. She was just a fragment of consciousness. It was normal for her to not have her own memories. On the contrary, it was very abnormal for him to suddenly remember so many things. "Hello, Lady Yi Tian." Gu Han walked to Yi Tian's side and stretched out a hand, wanting to shake her hand. "You're the swordsman who came to coordinate with me?" Yi Tian turned around and completely ignored Gu Han's hand. She only glanced at Gu Han's face before covering her mouth in disgust. "Oh, what an ugly face. Hurry up and go away. This heroine doesn't want to be your sword lady. Hurry up and go away." Gu Han was very embarrassed. This was the first time someone had made such a bad comment about his face. However, Gu Han didn't care. When he chose the scar on his face, he knew that he would have to face this kind of result sooner or later. "I'm sorry, Lady Yi Tian. Since I'm able to come here, it means that I have 10 of your secret manuals. You have no reason to refuse me unless I'm unable to synchronize with you," Ji Yu Lung said coldly. According to the rules of the Sword Tower, as long as the swordsman gathered the tokens, the sword lady would definitely coordinate with the swordsman. Whether it succeeded or not was one thing. However, the sword lady couldn't reject the swordsman's synchronization. Even if the swordsman was an emperor sword, it couldn't. The Sword Tower has its rules and I have my own. You're just a swordsman in a game. What right do you have to coordinate with me? Get lost. I don't like you. Yi Tian's words caused Ji Yu Han's expression to turn angry. Yi Tian pretended to be asleep at the beginning, but now she was acting like she was a big shot. Did she really think that he, Gu Han, was useless? That's not up to you, Lady Yi Tian. Gu Han took a step forward and wanted to grab Yi Tian's wrist. As he had attacked in anger, his speed was very fast and there was a strong gust of wind. I didn't know that you had some skills. Yi Tian squinted her eyes and leaped up. She jumped to the top of the ceiling and stood on the chandelier. The strange thing was that Yi Tian was only standing on one side of the chandelier, but the chandelier didn't seem to be tilting at all. This was a serious violation of Newton's classical mechanics. If Newton saw this, he would crawl out of his coffin. F***ck, is this Qinggong? Looking at the unmoving chandelier, Gu Han's eyes lit up. Even if Gu Han used Qinggong, he couldn't make the chandelier not move at all. I didn't expect you to be a kindred spirit. It's a pity that you're too ugly. It's embarrassing for me to have a swordsman like you. So, you should just go home and find another sword lady. It's more suitable to not waste time on me. Sorry, for you, Lady Yi Tian, I've already spent 9 million renminbi. If I can't bring you back, where would I put my face? After saying that, Ji Yu Han secretly exerted strength in his legs and shot towards Yi Tian like a cannonball, his hand reaching out to grab Yi Tian. Gu Han's speed was extremely fast and he suddenly attacked while they were talking. Yi Tian was caught off guard. Although she reacted within a few milliseconds and jumped away from the chandelier, she was still grabbed by Gu Han. You can actually touch me, swordsman. Yi Tian revealed a shocked expression for the first time. She had to re-evaluate Gu Han. This man seemed to be a strong enough opponent. You're also very powerful, Lady Yi Tian. Number 1 in swordsmanship with treasured swords and number 3 in swordsmanship with famous swords. Lady Yi Tian, you really live up to your reputation. Gu Han was also shocked by Yi Tian's reaction speed. Whether it was reaction speed or movement technique, Yi Tian's distance had reached an extremely high level. It crushed King Yu's shoddy swordsmanship by dozens of times. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to touch the hilt of Yi Tian. Otherwise, he could forcefully synchronize with Yi Tian. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.